Meeting of the Billings City Council. If you would please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation by Councilmember Frank Ewald. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Heavenly Father, as the summer heat wave and drought continue, please send cooling rain. Rain that will moisten the earth, that will help extinguish the wildfires threatening people's lives and homes, that will replenish the rivers and reservoirs and give new life to vegetation. Please protect all those in harm's way of the wildfires and all those involved in helping with extinguishment. For your guidance of this elected body, we thank you and we ask for your continued guidance. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Denise, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Shaw.
Here.
Yakowicz.
Excused.
Neese.
Here.
Ewald.
Here.
Joy.
Present.
Cherokee.
Here.
Purinton.
Present.
Ronnie.
Here.
Boyette.
Excused.
Brown.
Here.
Mayor Cole.
Here. Our first order of business are minutes for July 12th, 2021. That meeting, I believe that there is at least one amendment to that, relatively minor one. Councilmember Neese, I think you suggested that. Would you like to describe what that was in comparison to what was sent out to us?
I think on the consent agenda, there was a duplicate approval on that consent agenda. I sent that to Tony or Denise, so I would say we just need to strike the first approval documentation, and then the last one is probably the one we need. Okay,
and Denise, can you tell us whether that's been addressed?
It has. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, so that change has been made. Is there a motion or further discussion on the minutes of July 12th? Councilmember Joy.
Thank you. I move we approve July 12th, 2021 minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Shaw. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Thank you very much. Council courtesies. Anything from any member of the council? Councilmember Ronnie?
Thank you. I just wanted to share with everyone how wonderful and fun the softball game between Billings PD and the fire department was this past weekend. Councilwoman Joy and I attended. It was extraordinarily well received. There were a lot of families there, and thanks to the Mustangs, they allowed all the spectators to come in for free and watch the game. And good luck to fire next year, because police won this year. So and the vote. Oh, there's where my mind is. The score was a 6-4 favor police, but it was a lot of fun and good for them. They raised money for both of their charities, so thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to the Billings Police Department and the Billings Fire Department, who will get them next year. Proclamations, are there any other council courtesies? Councilmember Bernice.
I'd like to recognize the Tillman Lutheran up in the Heights. They held the night out. It was a community event between the community and the police. There was a really nice event. A lot of people got together and they got to meet the police. The police chief spoke there, as well as Councilman Ewald. So it was nice to get the community and the police together on that. So
great. Thank you very much. Any other council courtesies? Don't see any. We'll move on then. Council proclamations. We have one proclamation this evening. It is in recognition of the National Health Center Week, which is especially appropriate because John Felton is in our audience tonight. And the proclamation reads as follows. Whereas for more than 50 years, community health centers like Riverstone Health Clinic have provided high quality, affordable, comprehensive, primary and preventative health care in our nation's underserved communities. And whereas Riverstone Health Clinic is Montana's first community health center, having been established in 1984. And in addition to providing health care for homeless outreach clinics, Riverstone has clinic locations in Bridger, Joliet, Warden, as well as school-based health centers at Orchard Elementary and Medicine Crow Middle Schools. And whereas 1 in every 10 Montanans gets care at a Montana Community Health Center, including nearly 14,000 people through Riverstone Health Clinics. And whereas Riverstone provides essential resources and support in testing and treatment in the face of the global COVID-19 pandemic, and will continue to offer reliable, affordable, high-quality care against COVID-19 for the community's most vulnerable and underserved. And whereas Riverstone Health Clinic generates more than $25 million in economic activity for the community each year, and whereas Riverstone Health Clinic reduces overall healthcare spending by helping manage patients' chronic conditions, which keeps them out of costlier healthcare settings like hospital emergency rooms. And whereas National Health Center Week offers the opportunity to celebrate Riverstone and all of America's community health center organizations, their dedicated staff, board members, patients, and all those responsible for their continued success and growth. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the week of August 8 through 14, 2021, be recognized as National Health Center Week. And I encourage all Billings residents to take part in this week by recognizing Riverstone Health Clinics in Billings, Bridger, Joliet, and Warden, and celebrate the important partnership between America's community health centers and the communities they serve. That concludes then our proclamations for this evening. Move on to council reports. Any council reports from organizations that council members serve on behalf of the city? I see none, so administrator reports. The first item up, if this is okay with you, Chris, as we discussed, we asked John Felton, and we mentioned this to the council last week, since we haven't seen John for a while, to come back and give us a report. And so if John Felton, if you want to come to the podium, we'd appreciate it. I told John in a conversation today, he is the man who needs no introduction, but he'll get one anyway as our county health officer. Sadly, your presence here is more necessary than I would like because our numbers have continued to go up along with much of the rest of the country. And that's infection rate, hospitalization, and deaths, primarily amongst the unvaccinated. So, John, we look forward to hearing an update on where we're at with COVID-19. I'd also ask if you could to address the issue of vaccination and vaccination rates. Sadly, Montana is well below the national average in vaccination rates, and Yellowstone County is below the state average. And so states like Florida that have seen a huge increase in Delta transmission and hospitalizations have a higher vaccination rate than Yellowstone County and Montana. So I do have some concern about whether we will see happen here what we have seen in other parts of the state. And also, if you could comment on, is there something we can do to increase our vaccination rates, in particular incentive programs? We have received a lot of dollars, as has the county, millions of dollars in American Rescue Plan Act compensation. And so I, for one, think we need to have a discussion about what we can do together as a partnership to improve those vaccination rates. So, John, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. First of all, thank you for the Community Health Center proclamation. That was very kind. We appreciate that. As the mayor said, I'm back because after a couple months of being quiet, things are less quiet. So I've got some slides you've seen before. Oh, here we go. Here's a clicker, and some that I haven't shown you before. So this one is this is from Harvard. And this looks at, on a state-by-state basis, what status we're at. So you can see the sort of northward marching red line. Thank you. 3 or 4 weeks ago, virtually that entire map was yellow, and a few spots of green. You can see Florida is at 148 per 100,000. They have about 1/5 of all the cases in the country right now are coming out of Florida. At our peak, our highest month was 106 per 100,000. So it really shows really how on fire that area is. Each day, this map gets less yellow. And so 2 weeks ago, we were yellow. This is like, you've seen these before, but I want you to particularly note the right side of the charts. So again, the blue lines are the cases per day. The red line is the moving 7-day average. And this is for the entire state. You'll see that there's 2 blanks in each week. That's because the state no longer counts cases and reports on weekends. But clearly, things are moving up at a really rapid pace. Yellowstone County is also moving up, not at the same pace. In fact, on today's map, I think we're 3rd in terms of number of active cases behind Flathead County and Cascade County. I will tell you that what we've seen in the past is hot spots tend to cool off, and places that weren't quite as hot tend to get hotter. So it would not surprise me as we move forward to see Yellowstone County continue to climb. When you look at this one, so the blue line is the 7-day average in Montana. The red line is the 7-day average in Yellowstone County. So you can see we have increased, but not at the pace of the rest of the state. We've seen that picture elsewhere. We're down to about 10% of the state's cases. That's the gray line. Again, we're about 15 or 16% of the state's population. So all that really tells us is that the rest of the state is increasing at a rate more rapidly than Yellowstone County. This should make us pretty nervous, quite frankly. That yellow line is 10 cases per 100,000 per day, which in Yellowstone County is about 16 cases a day. The red line is 25 cases per 100,000 per day, which is about 40 cases per day in Yellowstone County. You can see that from around the 1st of March through the end of July, we were right around the same place, 10 plus or minus a little bit. 2 weeks ago, the week ending July 24th, we were at 8.4 cases per 100,000 per day. That almost doubled in the week ending July 31st, and has gone up another 30% in the week ending August 7th. So at 20 per 100,000 per day, that's about 32 cases a day after a long time when we stayed at that sort of 12 to 14 or 15 cases a day. When you look at it by month, again, you can see August is very different. We had 5 consecutive months that were between 14 and 16 cases per 100,000 per day. Or sorry, those are actual cases, so we're between 9 and 10 cases per 100,000. Thus far in August, again, it's only through the first week, but we've basically doubled that rate through the first week of August. Test positivity, which is often a leading indicator for what hospitalization is going to look like. Hospitalization lags about 2 to 3 weeks behind test positivity changes. You can see that for the last 2 weeks, we've been above 5%, which is our demarcation between green and yellow status. We've not been up to red status. You have to go all the way back to the end of January to see red status, but again, we're going in the wrong direction. This should be a significant concern to us. This is our total inpatient census of our 2 hospitals. If we look at that mark where we are now of about 50 patients, you have to go all the way back here to January to see that same number of COVID inpatients. And mind you, that's only COVID-19 inpatients. That's not everybody else. So the hospitals right now, this is typically a very busy time for them because people are out and about. There's a lot of injuries. There's a lot of people are getting surgeries over the summer, so our hospitals are quite busy. They're still certainly holding their own, managing the caseload. But when you look over the last several weeks, the pace of increase in hospital inpatients, you can really tell something is going on. This looks at our hospital on a monthly basis, our 2 hospitals, their average daily census. So at our peak, we were just short of 140 patients in the hospitals. We've now jumped that up. We're a little over 40 for the first week of August. That's through today. The red line shows the proportion of patients that are intensive care unit patients. So you see that's gone up a little bit since our peak. In 1 month, we were actually over 40% of our hospital days were in the intensive care unit. So these really are very sick patients. This is another one that looks at hospital inpatients. This is the proportion that are Yellowstone County. The reason this is really important to us is we spent the last 40 years positioning Billings as the regional hub for healthcare. And so we have an obligation to those outlying communities to support them. And you can see that as as our cases have grown, we're getting more and more patients from outside of Yellowstone County. That is our regional mission, that's our job. But it's the reason we pay a lot of attention to counties besides just Yellowstone County. This is age groups. This has not changed. This has been very steady. I think the most important piece is, as the mayor said, we'll talk about vaccinations, but 2/3 of our cases are between 20 and 59 years old. Those are the working age adults, obviously. We've been really steady at that 13 or 14% being in that school age group. And this just looks at school age. So the left side of this chart goes back to when school started last year. When school got out, you started seeing a lot of bouncing around of those numbers. That's largely because our case counts were so low that a couple more or less kids in those very low case counts would swing the proportion quite significantly. We're now right on the cusp of going back to school. And you can see this last week, about 18% of our cases were in that 0 to 19 age group. That is one of the issues with Delta. There's been some interesting conversations about Delta that seem to indicate that it does not necessarily disproportionately affect children. What happens is there's a lot more kids who are getting ill, though, and a more significant proportion of those are getting tested and deemed positive. So there's just a lot of cases out there. I'm going to switch now to immunizations. This is obviously a big issue for us. We've said over and over that the fastest and surest and safest way to move through the pandemic is to get a large proportion of the population vaccinated. The blue line on this stacked bar graph, the blue line shows the proportion of Yellowstone County residents who have had natural infection, and the green line shows the proportion of Yellowstone County residents that have been fully vaccinated. There's a lot of question about if people who have had a natural infection should also get vaccinated. It is quite clear that for most people, there's a more robust immune response to vaccination than natural infection. And in fact, according to CDC guidance, if an individual has a natural infection and they get exposed again to their close contact to another COVID case, they don't need to quarantine so long as that exposure is within 90 days of when they recovered from their natural infection. So if you're 120 days out from when you recovered, you would need to quarantine again, just like an unvaccinated person would. A vaccinated person who gets exposed as a close contact does not need to quarantine, regardless of the time. So it's really clear that there's a more robust response to immunization rather than natural infection, which is why we continue to encourage people who have had natural infection to also get vaccinated. This is something that I think should bother us quite a bit in terms of looking how flat that curve is getting. So the blue line shows the total number of doses administered, and so each week adds that week, and you can see it's getting pretty flat. The number of fully vaccinated, the red line, is getting really flat. It's not changing by much at all. And you can see that here. So at our peak, we were administering over 9,000 doses a week. We're now somewhere around a tenth of that. So it really is significantly lower. You can see, if you look at the last 3 weeks, we were at 1,200 doses the week ending July 25th. That's when people started getting really concerned about Delta and increasing cases. That jumped to 1,700 the week ending August 1st. So we were hopeful we'd see that increase and continue, but it dropped down to about 1,400 doses this last week. So we're just adding, it's going to take us a long, long time at 500 or 600 people a week to hit those high numbers that we really need to see. The next few graphs have some different timelines on because of when they're published. So this is as of July 30th. This is published by the state. This is the most recent issue of this report. So you can see Montana is at 48% as of July 30. Yellowstone County is at 47%. The range runs from around 30% or below 30% up to a little over 60%. So we are reasonably close to the state. Again, from the perspective of protecting the population, we'd really like to see that number up north of 75%. So we have a long ways to go. This is another report from the state. It reports this a little bit differently. It calls vaccine uptake people that have received at least one dose as opposed to being fully vaccinated. And you can see that overall, Yellowstone County is about 50-50 of having received at least one dose. That's eligible Montanans. Now, bear in mind, the virus doesn't care. When you're looking at population protection, the virus doesn't care if you're eligible or not. It only cares if it runs into someone who's vaccinated. So we have about 25,000 kids under the age of 12 who are not eligible. So the proportion of the population that's vaccinated or received at least one dose is below that 50%. This is where we look at by age. Again, this only goes down to age 12 because that's the level of that vaccines are available. Remember when we looked at the age grouping, we saw this 2/3 of our cases are between 20 and 59. These are all different databases, so the age cohorts don't match up perfectly. But if you look at, say, that 25 to 64 group, you can see that only a little over 40% of that entire group is vaccinated. And that is our group of the largest number of cases. We're in pretty good shape for the older groups, at almost 80% of those over age 70 being vaccinated. If you take a cohort above 80, it gets a little higher even. This I wanted to talk to a little bit about breakthrough cases. So breakthrough cases are those people who are fully vaccinated who then go on to have another infection. Bear in mind, fully vaccinated means that you're at least 2 weeks beyond your final dose. So someone who gets one dose and then a week later gets sick or 2 weeks later gets sick would not be considered a breakthrough case because they're not fully vaccinated. So you can see here, and this is from CDC, the citation is up on the top there. And what they're really looking at is people who get hospitalized or die of COVID-19. There is no vaccine that is 100% in terms of preventing all potential infection. What these vaccines really do is they really prevent severe illness. So out of 164 million people who have been fully vaccinated in the U.S., we've had 7,525 reported hospitalizations. Of those, we've had 1,507 deaths. So when you start doing the math, people who are fully vaccinated are 99.995% protected against severe illness. It's not 100% because nothing is, but that's pretty darn close. In terms of deaths, because only about 1 out of 5 of those people die, you're 99.999% protected against death for people who are fully vaccinated. These are very good vaccines. They're safe. They work really well. I would mention, I know one thing that frequently comes up when we talk about the safety of vaccines is the VAERS reporting, and I honestly don't recall what VAERS stands for. It's the self-report database that people who can write in. It's a federal database, and list their concerns about having been vaccinated and then either a bad outcome or what they're concerned. Again, these are self-reports. If someone gets a vaccine and gets hit by a bus and dies, they can say, I got vaccinated someone can report for them. 2 days after this person was vaccinated, they died. So you gotta be really careful of that self-report. It's not to say all those cases are that way, but it is a self-report, and it's kind of whatever people choose to put in there. These are very safe vaccines and clearly have a really strong protective effect on the people who are vaccinated. I'm going to jump here to variants. So this map shows you the variant counts by county. Montana does not test every case for variants. It's mostly done on a proportionate basis. It's a random trial of those, a random selection of those that go to the state health lab. We have been asked for any person who's hospitalized to do the variant testing, send that off for variant testing. When you look at this, you can see that here's Yellowstone County down at the bottom. We have about 20%, a little over 20% of all of the Delta cases in the state. So a little bit more than our population, but not by much. So the Delta variant is one that is much more transmissible. It's somewhere between 2 and 4 or 5 times as transmissible as what's called the wild case, the original coronavirus. And so it spreads very rapidly. People who have been vaccinated can get infected more easily with Delta than with the other variants. And there's a small proportion of people who are vaccinated who can spread Delta. That's why CDC has come out with a recommendation that in indoor spaces, particularly compressed indoor spaces, we go back to masking, regardless of vaccination status. I will tell you that in our organization, we have gone back to universal masking indoors. We follow the CDC guidance in terms of if we can't fully space people, then we go back to remote meetings and that sort of thing. It's pretty serious. This is from a website called covariance.org. And what this looks at is the proportion of cases, and this is by state. I didn't put that on, this is actually Montana, that are those particular subtypes of variants. So the blue line is the alpha variant. That's the one that came out of the UK early on. The red line is the Delta variant. And these are in 2-week time frames. So you can see in mid-May, 1% of the cases in Montana were Delta, and about 78% were alpha variants. So the variants tend to move much more quickly through the population. The 2-week period ending July 26th, 83% of the cases in Montana are Delta. And then there's about 12 or 13% that are alpha, and then there's just sort of the smattering of the others. This is fairly consistent with what the U.S. is seeing in terms of the proportion of cases that are Delta cases. So that's the story. It's not a good story. We've got a lot of things happening right now. We've got kids getting ready to go back to school. So I believe that we're going to see most school districts are going to do mask optional. There's not going to be mask requirements in schools. We've got, as things get colder, people are going to start to come back indoors. I think the best thing that we can do is somehow figure out how to drive up the vaccination rate. Now, under Montana law, we cannot mandate that. Employers can't mandate vaccination. You can't discriminate on the basis of vaccination. So it's going to be up to people making that personal decision. I think anything that we can do that helps people understand the reality of vaccinations and get away from sort of the echo chamber of social media and rumor and stories. I still periodically get have people tell me that these vaccines go in and alter people's DNA. That simply is not true. They use a messenger RNA function, which never even enters the nucleus of a cell. So there is no alteration of DNA. We have a fair number of people saying that when they get full FDA approval, as opposed to the emergency use authorization, maybe they will consider more getting vaccinated. I hope that's true. According to most everyone that you hear or read, it's expected that the Pfizer product will get FDA approval within the course of the next several weeks. We also have a lot of pediatric trials going on. Those data there's been some preliminary reports of those data that are really positive, but we don't yet have even an emergency use authorization for those under 12. So anything that we can do to encourage people to get vaccinated, to encourage people to get good, solid information about the vaccines and how well they work, I think is something we should really focus on. We do not want to go through another season like we had last year. The likelihood of being quite that bad is quite a bit smaller because a lot of the vulnerable population is protected. But again, you've seen hospital populations go from 14 or 15, where they sat for quite a while, to triple that over the course of the last week or 10 days. So we don't want to get there. So with that, Mayor, I would be happy to stop and answer any questions.
So thank you, John. Very helpful, if not reassuring. But if you can just go back to where you ended, what can we do to help those vaccination rates increase? Specifically, the city council, Riverstone, Yellowstone County, whoever else, the hospitals, whoever the players could be in that effort.
Yeah, so we've seen some things that have helped. So the data still indicate that people want to hear from their doctors. They want to hear from their medical care providers about this. We now have more vaccines available in medical practices. Ultimately, this needs to be treated like other vaccine preventable disease. So when people get their influenza vaccine, they typically go to their doctor, or we usually do 1 or 2 sort of mass vaccination clinics a year, and we do some employers. So the vaccine is moving into those. People need to ask their doctors and their medical care providers those questions and get their questions answered. In talking to some of our medical staff, several of them have told me sometimes it takes 2 or 3 or 4 conversations with patients to answer their questions and get a comfort level. We've seen incentives work. This is really widely advertised or notarized that the Riverstone Health Foundation received 2 donations of $20,000 each from generous donors, and those 2 donors wanted those funds to be used for incentives. So at that time, we were still doing vaccine clinics at the Shrine. We were typically doing about 100, give or take a little, each session, first doses. So what our foundation chose to do was to turn those $20,000 into 400 $50 bills. And the first 400 people through got a $50 bill. What we saw the first time that happened, we gave 570 vaccines that day, which means not only did we attract a lot more people, but 170 people stayed after the money ran out. The second time we did that, the foundation got another donation. They did the same thing, and we did just a couple doses short of 400. So incentives do matter. You've seen lots of incentives around the country. You've seen what Butte has done in terms of drawings. You've seen the $1 million lottery in Ohio. You've seen states that use their ARPA money to do college, guaranteed college for people who get vaccinated and qualify. There's lots of things that can be done. I think the incentives work. It pushes some people kind of over the edge to convince them to do that. I think that's probably especially true for younger folks, that 12 to 17 population that we need to get to. So I think that's one thing. I think really providing information to people in a way that gets out of the echo chamber, that is factual and has the right messenger delivering it. Those are good things to do as well. And I think the other thing is just reminding people, under the changes in the law through the legislature, you're not going to see mandated things like limitations on hours of occupancy or hours of operation or limitations on occupancy. But what we do know is that businesses need healthy workers. We've heard a lot about the workforce issues we're facing. We know that businesses need healthy customers. So a lot of our economic recovery depends on having a healthy population. So it isn't just the medical side of things. I think when we look at how do we keep schools productive and keep kids in school, how do we keep businesses open and operating, all that right now, the best weapon we have is vaccination.
Thank you very much. Other questions for John? Councilmember Tricky and Councilmember Neese?
I think given the numbers and where things are at, and the fact that we haven't gotten a vaccine yet for 12 and under, my biggest concern is in the 20 to 30-year-olds who are parents and their children, and that the schools are going to become a huge vector for spreading this virus. Can you tell us a little bit about where the school board is right now on this and what they're planning to do?
So School District 2, the school board has empowered the superintendent to make the decision on masks. At this point, the intent is to begin school with a mask optional, which I think one of the ways we need to think about that is mask optional really should mean masks welcome. There's been a lot of shaming that's gone on with people, either because they do or don't wear their masks. Neither of those are appropriate. But we need to create an environment that says to people, if you feel more comfortable wearing your mask, please do. I think the other thing that's going to be different this year, though, is last year we depended on the schools to do a lot of the contact tracing. That created a lot of difficulties for school staff and the relationship between school staff and family members and parents. And also, we've got to get teachers and administrators back to being educators. So what that means is we won't have as much information at our fingertips as the schools do with respect to kids who are exposed and are potentially should be in quarantine. So I think, yeah, there's a lot of concern about schools as potential vectors of outbreaks. I would say one thing sort of on the other end of the spectrum is we have had a number of long-term care facilities that are in outbreak status, and that sounds a little worse than it is because under federal guidance, an outbreak in a nursing home can be one staff member or one resident. But what we have seen is very limited numbers of outbreaks and very limited extent of those outbreaks. So I think our nursing homes and assisted livings have done a really good job of protecting that population. Schools can be difficult. The other schools I think are going to probably in the county are probably going to be in much the same boat as School District 2, starting with a mask optional situation. We will not have the ability under the current law, for instance, to issue orders that caused a lot of heartache last year with respect to the number of spectators. We can't do that from a public health perspective. Schools have much more flexibility in how they manage those things than public health does.
Thank you very much. Before I go to Councilmember Neese, it's a good reminder that for anybody who would like one, there are masks available back on the cart by the door. So please feel free to avail yourself of a mask. Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. John, you mentioned that you think people will follow the medical community, their doctors and things like that. I think you had a good press conference last Wednesday. I thought it was well said. I think if anyone hasn't watched that, you should go back and listen to that, because we heard from both, not only you, but Billings Clinic and St. Vincent as well. One of the things they was asked was what percentage of the hospital staff are vaccinated. I think, they're looking for the medical community to follow suit in a lot of respects. And I think, I don't remember everyone's, but the one I do remember was St. V's was like a 66% qualified because they had some people out. So how again, to help the people realize that, even the medical community is getting this, how can we, really help the people become more aware that, hey, it's safe, even your doctor, your nurse, your practitioners taking these type of things, and show that the percentages are up in that 70-80% that like we need to do that.
Yeah, so we being the Unified Health Command medical healthcare members, we do a lot of work with our staff to really encourage them to, if they're uncomfortable with the vaccine information, ask the experts. So we make, for instance, our medical staff is widely available to answer those questions. We're not as high as we'd like to be. It's a little difficult to get an exact measure because under the revised law, House Bill 702, we can ask, but we can't mandate that people answer the question about their vaccination status, nor can we mandate they become vaccinated. But I think, what we hear from some staff is they have some of the same concerns that other people have, which is, I wish it had fully, most common thing we hear is I wish it was fully approved by the FDA. If that happens, then hopefully we'll see a bump in those rates. So it's kind of the same thing. It's obviously the medical and healthcare community is a higher rate of vaccination than the general populace. But I agree that I'd feel much happier if we were at a much higher rate. And we just continue to work on that. As an example, I wrote, we issue an electronic newsletter to our staff every month, and my column in August really talked about, leading from the front. And part of that is that we need to show the community that we trust and believe in the vaccines, and please consider getting vaccinated if you're not. And ask the questions. I think, as I said, several of our doctors have mentioned that with some of their patients, it takes several conversations. I've been asked the question, what do you think is the most important trait of leadership? And my answer is always perseverance. You got to figure out which is the main rock to push up the hill and then just keep pushing it. And I think that's where we are with this.
Another quick question.
Go ahead.
We always see the county stats as far as percent vaccinated and stuff like that. Is there any way to zero down on see what the percentage of the city of Billings is? Because I would think as a metro area, we would have more population maybe being vaccinated versus the people in the county.
Yeah, we could do that to the extent that we have zip code information, but where part of that challenge is, for instance, 59101 covers a lot of territory, including Lockwood, which is almost 10,000 people. So it's really hard. We have done some work with Yellowstone County GIS, Geographic Information Systems. where, again, to the extent that the data is in there that has a good address, that is to say not a post office box or a complete address, where we've looked at various neighborhoods and identified where there's more or less vaccination levels. It's pretty hard because we only have a limited number of zip codes, and census tract information does not go into the database.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for John? Don't see any, John. Appreciate it, and let's stay in touch, as
Thank
they
you all.
say. Chris, anything else? We have city administrator reports.
Couple of brief items, Mayor. There were 5 ex parte communications. All of those came in after 3 today, and they were all pertaining to the ballot issue discussion on the agenda. And then lastly, I just wanted to point out, fairly obvious from the agenda, you see it crossed out, but item 2 in the regular agenda, that applicant withdrew. The petition was withdrawn, so that's why you see item 2 marked out for this evening. And that's all that I have, Mayor and Council, unless there are any questions.
Don't see any, so we'll move on to public comment on non-public hearing items. So for everybody in the audience, this is your opportunity to come to the podium and comment on anything that is item number 1. That's our consent agenda. The only other remaining item is from our regular agenda, the public hearing on the possible ballot issue involving recreational marijuana. There will be an opportunity for public hearing on that later. So don't come forward for that now, but if you would like to comment on anything on our consent agenda, which is item number 1, and all those subparts, feel free to come forward now on item number 1. Any public comment on item number 1? Don't see any, so we'll close the public comment period on non-public hearing agenda items and move on to item number 1, our consent agenda. First, our separations. I'll be separating item 1G because I need to recuse myself on that one. When we get to that, I'll hand the gavel to our Deputy Mayor Pro Tem, Councilmember Neese. Other separations, Councilmember Purington.
I'd like to separate 1C and also 1K.
Item 1C, grant application request to submit our town grant application. And what was the last one? K, second reading on arterial construction fees. Thank you very much. Any other separations? Councilmember Neese.
I move to approve the items of the consent agenda as submitted, except item 1C, G, and K.
Before I recognize that motion, I just want to confirm there weren't any other separations. Don't see any, so, okay. All right, so the motion is for approval of the non-separated items. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Ronning. Discussion. Any other discussions, questions for staff pertaining to the non-separated items? Councilmember Ewald.
Thank you, Mayor. I just got a question on 1B1 and 1B2. I think state law is that you need to have all work completed in 2 years' time to get reimbursed by insurance companies for any hail damage. So I'm wondering what dates these hail damages actually occurred.
Okay, so yeah, hail repairs for the city library, 1B1, and Stewart Park hail repairs. Question about, is there a deadline? Jessica Iverson, I'll turn it over, Chris, to Jessica, if that's okay.
Hello,
Jessica.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Councilmember Ewald, we are in constant contact with the insurance company. We have weekly meetings. So the timeline is the original damage was in August of 2019, so we are coming up on that. However, they are still honoring all of the claim damage until we conclude the projects.
One follow-up question, please.
Please.
And both of these two claims were in the same hailstorm?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on the motion for approval of non-separated items? Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to recognize the donations to the Parks Department. We had two, besides the one that's separated. There's a donation by the Big Sky Economic Development for the Colson Park of $6,000. I think and Mike, can you remind me what that brings the total donations up of the $250,000 matching grant on that is? Sorry, I asked you that earlier today and I got it, but
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I think there's been two donations that's been made directly to the city, and the $6,000 from Sabura, and I think it was $8,000 or $9,000 from another foundation.
Right,
So
okay.
those.
So we got a ways to go on that matching grant, but I just want to thank them. Thank you, Mike. And then we also had a donation by the Peter Yegan for some plantings in Pioneer Park, and so for a kind of a natural setting, rock benches and things like that. So it's, again, our communities get involved in helping develop some of these parks. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion? Now we'll proceed to a vote. Again, the vote is for approval of the non-separated items. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Bring us then to the first separated item, item 1C, grant application request. Councilmember Purington, that was yours. Would you like to start our discussion?
I wanted to separate that just because I looked on the website for the National Endowment for the Arts and really didn't see that connection between what was on the staff memo and what was on this. And Elise Monette, who is in the planning department, did respond to my queries about those. And I know Councilmember Joy has been part of that. There wasn't anything about community safety or whatever, but Elise did say that they're kind of tweaking it to make it fit into the different pockets that are, or requirements that are for that grant. And I think there was some information too on there that it said that the Arts Association was a part of that application process. And at this point, I would like to see, I think we have a very vibrant arts community in Billings. And for me, I just do not agree with putting that into a government entity, if you will, because part of that was also looking to making a commission. And so I will not be voting on that one or approving it.
Oh, okay, you're not recusing yourself, you're just stating your position on the ultimate vote, it sounds like. So,
Sure.
Okay, Councilmember Joy and Councilmember Ronning.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I move we approve grant application request to submit our town grant application to the National Endowment for the Arts and acceptance, if awarded, up to $50,000.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second? I'd recognize Councilmember Ronning if that was your intent,
yeah.
so, okay. Discussion now on the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? The motion is for approval consistent with the staff recommendation. Councilmember Joy and Councilmember Ronning.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. And thank you, Councilmember Purington, for looking into that and being concerned and involving yourself in the grant application. Grant applications, and I don't want to, just are very specific. So they require a partner. We have a very good partner here in our community. Part of what has been identified in our grant application is to have three kind of what is described as hubs. Now, most of these art projects really involve communities. So in other communities, they involve all kinds of artists, involve the people who live on that street. They agree on a project and they work through a project with an artist that is a part of safety in that it can be, art can involve traffic calming. It can involve people being more connected to their communities, and generally, people who are more connected to their communities are carefuler about their speed, careful in their speed, and take more appreciation for the neighborhoods that they move through. So who knows, the grant application is competitive. There will probably be 50 or 60 additional, or other applications. It's a very long process, and so we will see going forward whether that grant application is accepted and awarded. Last year, our town did not choose a project from Billings, so thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Running.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment that the arts are very much an occupation. They're an occupation just like an engineer, just like the donations we accepted to the Parks Department that will be installing different things in our parks, just like they are for the police force and we accept donations for the police force. I am an artist, and I appreciate the value of the education that I got in our Montana schools through public education, and I'm a graduate of Montana State University, and then went on to get my master's degree at the University of Mary here in Billings, and I'm very proud of the education I got for the arts right here in our state, and they are very much an occupation, and I think it's one of the occupations that I would love for our government to recognize more and put more value on that. So Councilwoman Joy and Elise and all of you from Planning and Community, the Community Services Department, I really appreciate putting Billings on the map for this, and I hope that we do get this grant. I just think it's wonderful, so thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. I had questioned this a little bit, and Elise emailed me, and my concern was regarding the memo stating there's no cost to the city. I think and then she indicated that they're going to be staff time, and there is a cost, and I would like to see our memos really reference what that estimated staff time and cost would be in the future. But she also mentioned that, this could come back to the council as once they decide on the three, if the grant's awarded and they decide on the 3 hubs, what that would look like and things like that. So my taste of art's gonna be different than Penny's or anyone else's. So if this comes back, if it gets awarded to the city, I sure would like to see it. She also indicated there's gonna be a lot of other people like Basita involved, community groups that will be donating, like they donate to the park. So as much as I think I'll go ahead and support this, but I would like to see it come back sometime to see what it is we're going to be putting out there in the city.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further discussion before we vote? Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I got to say, I get confused sometimes by the mixed messages that we send. We were all about, we got to find a grant writer. We want to start getting all the grants that we can possibly get. And here's a grant that relatively is low cost for us to even go out and after. And now, we're hearing, well, we may not even support this. I certainly will. Most of these grants obviously bring value to the city. So just a comment and an observation.
Thank you very much. Are we prepared to vote, Council? Okay, motion is for approval. Item 1C, consistent with the staff recommendation. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Councilmember, all votes in favor, except for Councilmember Purington. Thank you very much. Next item up, item 1G. As I said, I'm recusing myself. The reason wife and I made a contribution for the Centennial Park grand opening.
Do we need to give it back? Wow. Okay. Item 1G.
I move to approve item 1G.
Second by Ronnie. Any discussion? I'll take the time just to read the donors like I did on the other ones. Again, this is donations to Centennial Park grand opening. If anyone was there, it was a great grand opening, so we really enjoyed the time there. And the amount of dogs that came through that gate was just amazing. They just kept coming and coming, so the dogs really enjoy that park. And it's just not a dog park, but that was the grand opening for that. So Century 21, Mayor Bill and Ann Cole Shields, E-Faith, or Faith E-Church, DOG, Little Horn State Bank, Gordon and Robin Olson, all were on the list of donating on this. So we appreciate your donations to the parks like this, so thank you. With that, all in favor of item 1G, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Passes unanimously.
That was fast. I should recuse myself more frequently. Next item of council, item 1K, second reading, arterial construction fees. Councilmember Purinton, that was your separation. Would you like to start us?
Thank you. I think my question with this was, and I had an email back and forth with Jennifer today. So Debbie, I don't know, you might be able to weigh in on this. It was my understanding that, I guess it's the fees will be approved on the 23rd, but this is just approving of those, the code, if you will, so that it includes the changes because of recode.
That's exactly correct. This is just the language in the resolution. The rates will be here on the 23rd.
So I had a gentleman that called me yesterday, and he was quite concerned because he does have a single-family residence, but I guess with the way, you know, in reading that again, what Jennifer said to me is that even single-family residents, if they're not owner-occupied, then that means they're automatically considered a commercial property. Is that correct?
So his best action is just to submit the paperwork, and we will review it and see if it meets the qualifications or the criteria that's in the resolution.
And the reason being, I mean, that's what I was trying to get across, because they said there are single-family within the mixed family or the multifamily. So people have to go through that process of protest, and that was the letter that I think he received. But he didn't feel like there was any recourse to him, which I didn't read the letter, so I don't know, but I saw Jennifer's letter. So everyone does have an opportunity to do that, that protest portion.
Exactly, and that's similar to what we've done for a very, very long time. It's just that a lot of people haven't been in that category before, so this is new to them, but it's been done by many people throughout the city for many years.
And so are those rejected ever?
They can be.
And reason being?
You're probably going to get past my knowledge here.
That's okay.
It's not going to take very long. I can get back with you about what some of those have been historically, when we've ever said no to some of those.
And the reason being, and I do empathize with this gentleman, is that it is a rental property, and it's someone that, you know, has worked through COVID, you know, maintaining 2 to 3 jobs throughout the whole time, whereas others in the rental business, you know, they've lost their income and yet they still have a mortgage. And that was his big concern. And, you know, and I do empathize with the COVID thing, because there are people that are still suffering, you know, homelessness or on the edge of it. And, you know, he says, well, she won't be able to afford the rent now if it goes up. And I'm going, well, she won't be able to afford any other rent either if there's anything available. So I don't know if there's any extra precaution that we can take as a city whenever people do send in those protests.
We certainly look at each one on a case-by-case basis, and Chris looks like he wants to talk. Did you pull it up for a reason?
I would say that.
Well,
of course.
I want to give him the opportunity.
So Councilmember Purinton, Mayor and Council, so the key there is equity. So we don't just randomly decide who to give an exemption to or not. They've got the intent of what's happening there. So I'll use an extreme example, maybe a large lot, single-family house on it. But because the lot, that's why we have caps and other things, are they adding a lot to the transportation network versus in this case, not in this case, in some cases the opposite. Maybe a lot has 4 or 5 units on it, but for whatever reason under the old zoning, it was only paying as if it was a single family house. But the truth is there are 4 housing units on that site, and therefore we're trying always to get equity across what the fees and assessments are across the system. This specific issue, no, I don't know this one. I took a call this morning from a gentleman from out of town, had one. It looked like, I say this cautiously, but when I met with the staff in planning, they were looking at a $27 change in what it looked like it was going to be for this particular property. Whether it was this property or a different one, I'm not sure, but that was the adjustment they were looking at.
And so just one little follow-up. So that adjustment also would include that, was it 3.5% increase
Right.
that we did approve during the budget?
Yes, for the arterial fee.
Okay, because Jennifer said some would go down, some will go up, but then regardless of where you are on that spectrum, you're still going to have the 3.5% increase.
Right. And this resolution gets us closer, like Chris said, this gets us closer to that equity. We're starting to get the right categories assigned to the right properties.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you. Councilmember Ewald has his hand up, and then if there are motions or further questions, Councilmember Ewald.
Thank you, Mayor. It's my understanding that these exceptions are only if it's in a commercial zoned area and it's a residence in a commercial zoned area. Isn't that the way that the exceptions are put in for, is just commercial zoned areas?
So the letters that went out went to commercial because they haven't historically been in this category before. I would need to look at this and see if industrial, I mean, it should be industrial or commercial. Anybody that's in a zone that's actually single-family resident, we're trying to get, exactly like Chris said, we're trying to assess the proper fee for the effect they have on the system. So if there's single-family in an industrial area, they would be able to submit a petition as well.
And a follow-up, please, Mayor.
Sure, and then Councilmember Shaw and Neese.
So if it was just a single-family house in N2 and it was a rental, you don't have any more traffic going out of that on an arterial than if it was a single-family living in the house by themselves and not a rental. So, and you were saying earlier that they pay more if it's a rental?
No. Residential can submit to us, whether it's categorized commercial or residential is something that we'll look at when we get those petitions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Shaw and then Councilmember Neese.
Thank you. I move to approve item 1K.
Second.
Motion made and seconded for approval. So we have a motion on the table now. Approval consistent with the staff recommendation. Further discussion on the motion. Councilmember Brown.
Debbie, can you clarify that petition or whatever that they put in? That's a routine thing. That's not a one-time.
Right.
Only
They have to
thing.
submit that annually.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion? Any other discussion on the motion? Do not see any, so all in favor of the motion, which is for approval, please say aye. Aye. And if opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. That concludes then item 1, our consent agenda. It brings us to item number 3, item number 2 on a regular agenda having been withdrawn. So Denise, would you read item number 3?
Yes, Mayor. Public hearing and resolution referring ballot issue regarding prohibiting marijuana businesses to November 2nd, 2021 election. Staff recommends approval. Action this evening, approval or disapproval of staff recommendation.
Thank you very much. Chris, can you fill us in on what sort of staff presentation we have this evening?
Yeah, so I see City Attorney Gina Dahl, she's pulling up the presentation. And we don't have a lengthy presentation, but want to just kind of set up what we're going over this evening and ultimately what the choices are. So, Gina, are you or Karen?
I think it will be me, but Karen will likely jump in here as necessary. So, good evening, Mayor and Council. We've presented on this issue a couple times now. First, on July 6th during the work session, we first brought you this, presented to you some background information about the legislation that came with House Bill 701. As a result of that meeting, you directed staff to create a committee consisting of council members and staff to investigate what steps were needed to what steps need to be taken to submit the issue to the voters in November. At the same time, you directed staff to develop regulations for all the marijuana businesses in the event it was not submitted and did not pass. And then July 19th, we came back to you, provided an update. You were provided a proposed resolution by our office that would submit the question of prohibiting adult use dispensaries to the voters of Billings. At that time, we told you that the county was considering, they had actually published notice of a public hearing to consider whether to submit the issue to voters countywide. They held their hearing on August 3rd, which time they decided to include this ballot issue, this first slide that you're seeing regarding the 3% excise tax. So this slide is showing you what they are going to be presenting. The first question asks the voters if they want to impose a 3% tax on the retail value of all non-medical marijuana and marijuana products sold within Yellowstone County. The second question, the same, except for whether the voters want to impose a 3% tax on the medical marijuana products, medical marijuana or marijuana products to any products sold within Yellowstone County. At that August 3rd meeting, the county commissioners did not pass their resolution to submit the question overall about marijuana businesses to the voters, whether the voters wanted to prohibit all marijuana businesses. So that is the question being presented. This slide, the excise tax will be allocated, as shown here, 50% to the county, 50% of that 3% will be allocated to the county, 45% to municipalities, and the 5% will be retained by the Department of Revenue to defray their costs of administration. This next slide shows the just very basic formula of how much revenue is going to be generated for every $100 in sales. And as you can see, approximately 92 cents of that for every $100 will go to the city of Billings. And as you can see, $1.50 would go to the county and 43 cents to other cities within Yellowstone County.
So Gina, could I just go back to that slide
Absolutely.
previously, just to add a little bit of what kind of the total estimates are. So again, I emphasize these are estimates. They're based on an assumption that the state of Montana, that their estimates on marijuana sales are accurate. So using their data, and if, in this range, I'm going to give you $250,000 to $350,000 in revenue for the city of Billings. And the assumptions there, one, as I said, that the state of Montana's estimates are accurate by year 5. That's not year 1, that's by year 5. Number 2, why the range? The range is, will Billings sell 15%, which is pretty close to what our population is of the state, or will it be higher at 20% across the state? Nobody knows what it will be, but that's why there's a range of between 250 and 350,000 in estimated revenue. That assumes the state's estimates are accurate. That assumes that's by year 5, not year 1, and that assumes that the greater Yellowstone County sales would be close to representing our population base relative to the state of Montana's population base. So, thanks.
Thanks, and that's obviously why I didn't include actual numbers, because it's all estimates and it's really hard to predict at this point. So today is the time set for the public hearing on the city's resolution to submit the ballot issue regarding prohibiting adult use dispensaries to the voters at the November 2nd election. This ballot question is the result of the work of the committee, which consisted of council members and staff, whether to include all the categories of marijuana businesses. And the committee determined that the main concern of the legislation was the commercial sale of marijuana for recreational use So therefore, the question was narrowed to that one specific area. So your packet contains a resolution that sets forth the ballot language for the November 2nd election. Earlier today, I was asked to make some clarifications to that language to make it even more clear that this vote would not impact medical marijuana dispensaries. So this slide that I'm showing you now shows where those changes have been made to the actual ballot language. And you also have hard copies of this. So those highlighted portions will be included in, as you can see, the summary paragraph and the proposal paragraph. It just makes it very clear that the question being asked of the voters is not to whether to prohibit medical marijuana dispensaries. So that's the portion, that is a portion of the ballot language, is summary and the proposal. And then this last slide is the actual question to be asked. This will appear on the ballot as well. It just shows the actual question of whether adult use dispensaries, commonly known as recreational use marijuana, should be permitted in the city of Billings. I've also handed out their hard copy, like I mentioned, that shows you the red line version of those clarifying edits. In order to, that's all I have, so I don't know if you want me to leave that up or not, but in order to submit this issue to the voters, council does need to pass this resolution today in order to meet the statutory deadlines to get it on the November 2nd ballot. So with that, I don't have anything else to present. Unless you have any questions.
Okay, questions for staff. Councilmember Neese?
Gina, would you mind going back to the other screen with, yeah, there we go, the yellow. And the clarification, thank you, that's good. And I think when I read this, one of the things that popped in my mind, because we got a lot of emails from people thinking that this was going to, limit or eliminate the use of marijuana in the city. And I'm not so sure when you read this that doesn't clarify that, this also does not impact the possession and use of recreational marijuana. This doesn't prohibit that. So the only thing I would maybe add to that language, your consideration, is to say that it does not impact not only medical marijuana, it does not impact the use of recreational marijuana within the city, because there's nothing that the city can do about that. So that's the only thing I think I would add to clarify that we are not trying to limit, or can we limit the use of recreational marijuana.
Okay, we can certainly look at, if you have something specific to suggest, I'd be happy to look at that. Otherwise, I'm happy to try to present something.
I would kind of leave that to our good legal minds like the mayor or you to craft something that could fit within that to clarify that a little bit more so people
I mean,
don't.
if you all feel that that's an appropriate addition to make, then we will certainly need to do that before this is all finalized.
So, for example, I hate drafting it public on television, but sometimes you don't have any choice, right? Would it be consistent with your intent, Councilmember Neese, if we said something like, looking in the first yellow section, the remaining categories of marijuana businesses will not be impacted by this vote, including medical marijuana dispensaries, as well as the use and possession of marijuana, which will be permitted in, and then continue there.
And use of recreational marijuana. I would make sure we add that in there, because we are not trying to stop or limit the use of recreational marijuana.
Okay, so as the exact words would be, as well as the use and possession of recreational marijuana, and then the word which, so it would continue, which will be permitted in the City of Billings upon the effective date of House Bill 701.
Right, yeah, I agree.
Do we need to do a motion?
Up to the council completely, if that's the desire. Gina, were you tracking that? And I saw Karen.
I didn't get it all written down, but Karen wants to give some feedback on that.
One of the things, if you're looking to tie in use and sale of marijuana, some of the things that you need to be aware of, there are some limitations on use of all types of marijuana here in the state of Montana through House Bill 701. I'm a little hesitant to have the use tied up in here because there are exceptions to the use. Age, where you can use it, how you can use it, how much you can possess. And so if we try to tie a blanket, this does not prohibit the use of marijuana in the city of Billings, keep in mind that there are state exceptions that have been passed by the Montana legislature that we do not want to create confusion about that.
Point well taken, although again, the point is this impacted by this vote. And so we're not changing anything about that state law. You're just trying to clarify that the state law still applies. So is there, you would say, which will continue to be permitted in the city of Billings consistent with state law upon the effective date of House Bill 701. Think about that one while we carry on our discussion. Councilmember Brown and Ronning.
Thank you, Mayor. On kind of the same track that you were going, couldn't you just add in accordance with House Bill 701 or, something like that? So that we're saying you can use it, but you still have to abide by 701.
I agree.
If I may, Mayor and Council, I guess I would just be really hesitant to add this language that's being suggested. I understand the reason for it, but I really believe that the first sentence, well, actually the first two sentences, just really already address that. It indicates that legalizing possession and use of marijuana for adults over the age of 21, as well as certain marijuana businesses. And then the legislature passed House Bill 701 and modified provisions of 190, providing an option for electors to consider prohibition of the 7 categories of marijuana businesses. It doesn't say that they have even an option to consider prohibition of anything else. The ballot measure then asks the voters to approve or disapprove of adult use marijuana dispensaries, which is one of the various types of marijuana businesses which were authorized. I really don't think it needs it, but again, if you all believe that would clarify and make it cleaner and more clear to the voters, I'm happy to insert those suggested edits.
Okay, Councilmember Ronning had her hand up, and then Councilmember Purington.
Thank you. So my comment was before Gina spoke, but now that you said, I guess, Gina, not the majority of people I think are going to be non-legal minds reading this. And I think your legal mind reads it in one way, and I think non-legal minds read it in another way. So as I'm looking at this and I look at those sentences, the way they're written, the first sentence is saying that I-90 was approved by the electors of the city of Billings in a general election held, legalizing possession and use of marijuana for adults over the age of 21, as well as certain other businesses. Then the next one goes on to say that the Montana legislature modified I-90, providing an option for electors to consider prohibition of the 7 categories. So I guess when I would look at that as a non-legal mind, I may interpret that as it's saying, but the Montana legislature did something different than what that first sentence says. There's a possibility that I think that could be interpreted that way. And so I guess I would just like for you to consider, what Sean said. in accordance with, because that's what I was thinking also. But maybe just think about that a little bit more.
Yep, absolutely.
And I'm going to pass to Councilmember Purington, but going back to the language that I just threw out, I have some concern about that in that the English majors out here will understand this, that it isn't parallel with the rest of the paragraph, meaning that the first concept in the summary section there is possession and use, and then it talks about businesses. And then the yellow, based on what I said, would flip that order and would first talk about businesses and then possession and use. It might be better to, at the very beginning of the yellow, simplify it a little bit, and it would just say the use and possession of recreational marijuana and then continue here, the remaining categories of marijuana business will not be impacted by this vote, including medical marijuana dispensaries, which will be permitted in the city, blah, blah, blah. So think about that one, just putting at the beginning of the sentence, use and possession of recreational marijuana. Councilmember Purington?
You did a good job of wordsmithing. That was much better. Thank you. Because I was going to say that made sense to me the way that you guys had it. You girls had it. So, but I can see where you're coming from. And this was a question that I had posed before is in prohibiting the 7 categories, because especially the growing operations and the laboratory testing and some of those other things, some of the industries, if you will, that are concerned or that are involved with the marijuana industry. So are we saying as a council that you can grow the marijuana here? You can have the testing laboratories here. You will have you will have the medical marijuana dispensaries. And I'm trying to remember some of the other two. Well, the transportation, but I think that's kind of a given with the growing operation. So are we saying that we're okay with all of those? Because I'm not particularly okay with all of those. The growing operations, I think are kind of not a good neighborhood sort of thing, even though it's not going to be in neighborhoods.
Thank you for the question. The committee did discuss the issue, and the direction we ended in was that because the legislation has changed the way previously a medical marijuana provider had to do it all from, growing and manufacturing all the way to sale. Now the legislation is different. And so you can't separate out a cultivator for medical marijuana or for recreational. They just are cultivators, and they can then provide that to a medical marijuana provider or a recreational marijuana provider. So the determination that ultimately it was decided that the real concern was the commercial sale of it. And in order to focus on that is the adult use dispensaries. If you were to ask the question of voters, do you want to prohibit all 7 of the categories or 6 of them and keep medical marijuana? And they, in fact, decided to vote to prohibit all 6 except for the medical marijuana. Those medical marijuana providers would put them in a position of they don't have anywhere to get their products. And the testing labs are another thing if you wanted to prohibit that. Those are really an important part of regulations. So the testing labs are really an important part of the overall structure that was determined by the committee that would not be that council wouldn't really want to prohibit that. The consequences, the impact of that would be not as intended.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Rio, Councilmember Ronning?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Ewald first, I think.
So I'm looking at that, and I don't know, 5 or 6 lines up from the bottom, it says this ballot measure asks voters to approve or disapprove adult use marijuana dispensaries. Why isn't there adult use recreational marijuana dispensaries? Why wasn't recreational put in there? Because when people go in to vote, they sometimes don't read all the way to the bottom. So if you just say adult use medical marijuana dispensaries, and they don't read any farther, they go, that's medical and the whole works. So I think recreational should be slipped in there between adult use and marijuana dispensaries.
We used in the summary in the proposal, we used the language of the legislation, and in the actual question, we tried including that clarifying language. Adult
Just
use.
saying.
Okay, Councilmember Ronning?
Thank you. To follow up with Councilmember Purinton's question, Gina, can you clarify? So in regard to the 7 categories, we've removed medical marijuana because that's one of those 7 categories. So now we're really talking about 6 categories that. So I guess that if we look at this question, the question specifically is one of the categories of being adult use recreational dispensaries. The other 5 categories then, if this passes and the voters say, yes, we are for adult use dispensary, or if they say, no, we're not for adult use, adult use recreational dispensaries, those other 5 categories, the city, no matter how the vote comes out on this, the other 5 categories will still be regulated by the city of Billings. So the regulation could be in relation to adult use recreational marijuana. We could limit the number of growers, or we could limit the number of whatever the other 5 categories are. Is that correct?
Absolutely. The regulations that will be developed will encompass all of the businesses.
Yeah.
And try to take into account in all of those types of issues.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Further questions for staff? Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. I don't know why this is doing this. I just want to clarify that if this passes, we're not cutting ourselves out of the 3% excise tax.
Right.
That's correct. We're still eligible for that because that's countywide.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And that was about 31% of the total tax, right? Would come to the city? Was that the final number?
Let me go back to that. 30, yes.
So roughly 31% of 3% is roughly 1%. And remind me what the actual dollars are based on whatever estimates are out there?
I'm going to let Chris address that one because I have not committed that to memory because it's just too much of an estimate to me. I didn't think it's as valuable as it should be, so.
So again, the range assumes the state's estimate's accurate, and it assumes that Yellowstone County, representing roughly 15% of the population of the state of Montana, would have 15% of the sales at about $250,000 in revenue, or if we are at 20% of the sales, would be closer to $350,000 in revenue. So I don't want to, I guess, anytime we talk about this, this is definitely going to be what I perceive to be complicating issues about this ballot. Not even this question. Remember, we have a public safety levy question on the ballot. I'm extremely concerned that some people are going to make an assumption that 3% of revenue is going to bring us millions of dollars. It's not. Those are the estimates based on the state's projections. 250 to 350 for City of Billings under those assumptions. Thank you, in year 5.
Yeah, and only for medical.
No, I'm sorry, that for the state of Montana, sorry, for the state of Montana, that is, as I understand it, their estimate of marijuana sales, recreational and medical. Because the 3% actually goes on both. The difference, I'll get over my head really quick, but there is a substantial tax difference. state of Montana tax, medical versus recreational, but the 3% local is the same, as I understand it, recreational or medical.
Okay, Councilmember Treaky and Neese.
What's the unit analysis of that slide? Is it the entire state being broken down there, or is it the county?
The slide in front of you, that's the count. That would be for $100 in sales in the county.
In this county?
Yes.
Right, so I'm wondering what the what the other cities are in this county then?
Oh, the other cities,
Laurel.
yeah, like Laurel.
Yeah, but I mean, that means that they're getting 1/3 of the revenue and they don't have anywhere near.
So the statute, I'm sorry, Mayor and Council, the statute specifically lays out this formula. So this is not a formula to be negotiated or developed.
I understand that and I appreciate that. I'm just trying to, so that is for the county, and that 14% will be going to the other small towns in the county.
So just to clarify, it's probably more than just incorporated cities, I guess, to get up to 14%. Do we know?
I'm sorry, I did not look closely enough to understand the breakup, but I'm confident, again, based on the assumptions of the state's estimate, that Billings' share will be that 250 to 350 by year 5 if the state's assumptions are correct on the amount of sales.
Okay.
I didn't pay any attention to what Laurel would get or Broad or anybody else.
So the language, just the language of the bill says, if the county imposes a local option marijuana excise tax, 50% of the resulting tax revenue must be retained by the county. 45% of the resulting tax revenue must be apportioned to the municipalities on the basis of the ratio of the population of the city or town to the total county population, and then the remaining 5% to the Department of Revenue.
Okay, so we would get roughly 31% or 31/45 of the money going to the cities. Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. Chris, I just want you, if you could maybe address this estimate of the state, because I think when we were in our committee meeting and we met with that Ben Court, I believe it is, he mentioned how Colorado had their estimates and what actually came in. Can you kind of address what he talked about, how Colorado's estimates are actually, I think they were even lower than ours, but their estimates came in lower, but.
So Substance Abuse Connect had a gentleman in town last week, Ben Court is his name. You can check him out on YouTube, look at his TED Talks there. He had there was a community meeting last week. What he expressed in broad terms, and I think, actually we'll all make our own assumptions. The state of Colorado underestimated. Did the state of Montana underestimate? I think you'll find plenty of people who will speculate that the state of Montana has underestimated the sales. I certainly don't want to overestimate and we've not allocated any of this revenue. This years from now out. In fact, in the broadest statement, I would say, all due respect, I don't expect the revenue to cover the expense. He made that very clear, that as much as the revenue in the cities in Colorado is exceeding, I think, quite substantially higher than 3% at the local level, it doesn't cover the costs of the impact, but that is yet to be seen as to what the cost will be and what the revenue will be. I just wanted to be, everybody deserves to know. Obviously, you're interested, we're all interested, based on the law, what are the estimates? Quick answer to your question, his illustration was Colorado underestimated how much sales there would be of recreational and medical marijuana in the state of Colorado. I think people assume that's similar in Montana, but we won't know until this all happens.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Purinton and Councilmember Ronning.
Chris, I just wanted to back up a bit what you said about the 3% tax. That tax will go, it'll be 23% on recreational, then 20% the state imposed, then the 3% that the county imposes. And then you also said that medical marijuana, it would go, I think it's at 6% right now, so it would go to 9%? Is that, did I hear you say that correctly?
Councilmember Purinton, I mean, if I could be incorrect, my understanding is the 3%, the county-wide 3%, if the voters say yes, will go on both.
Okay.
Recreational and medical, equally, that there's not a difference in what the local option 3% is between the two types.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ronning.
Thank you. Not that I don't trust you, Chris, but can Karen or Gina clarify that? Because when we had that committee meeting, it was clearly stated that 3% goes on to medical and 20 or 23% goes to recreational when we had that meeting at the library. I mean, we had that was clearly stated, so.
Well, and of course,
Yeah.
we got to separate what's the state tax versus the local tax.
Yeah, the
but-
20% goes to the state, but, so can you just clarify that the 3% does go both recreational and medical?
Yeah, could whoever comments, please come to the podium, please.
Yeah, that was not said, yeah.
Thank you. Right there. This is where it's important that Yellowstone County is posing two different questions on the ballot. They are specifically asking the voters of Yellowstone County, do you want to assess the 3% excise tax on recreational marijuana? Do you want to impose the 3% excise tax on medical marijuana? So it's possible that the voters of Yellowstone County will decide to assess a tax on recreational marijuana and decide against assessing that tax on medical marijuana. The state tax rates are set by the state, 20% on recreational marijuana and marijuana products, 4% on medical marijuana and medical marijuana products. Assuming that the voters of Yellowstone County elect to assess the 3% excise tax on every type of marijuana and marijuana product, then the resulting tax to the consumer of recreational marijuana will be 23%, the 20 plus the 3, and then for the medical marijuana, the 4% plus the 3% for a total of 7%.
Thank you, Karen. And just to clarify, the 20% goes to the state. The 3% is what's divided according to the, not the 4%.
Correct.
3%.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Ewald.
Karen, please.
Karen?
Still go for it.
You're not going to make it far.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. On that 3%, you said the county has to do two questions. What if they just do one question, 3%, then does it automatically go on both, or does it just go on to recreational?
So the county commissioners at their last meeting decided that they would put both of these questions on the ballot.
Okay.
So that is a done deal. Had the county commissioners decided against posing this question, there would be no excise tax to allocate because the city of Billings is not permitted under the statute to put this question to the voters, only the county may.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you. Further discussion or questions for staff before we go to public comment? Anything else for staff? Councilman Purinton.
Just a quick question. So the ballot will be the same. On November ballot, you will have the county question, you will have the city question, you have the public safety mill levy, and you will have council candidates. Is that correct?
So in this instance, you will definitely have the public mill levy. You will definitely have the county's two questions, and what is up to council tonight is whether or not there will be another question from the city on the marijuana issues.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else before we go to public comment? Councilmember Bernice.
Mayor, I would like to take action to make a motion to amend the if you can bring back up the ballot form.
I actually just made the modification so you could look at it.
Oh, great. So I'd make a motion that we accept or adopt these changes for discussion so that the public comment knows that this is what we're looking at. That's my motion.
Okay, thank you. And Gina, would you just clarify for us the change that you've made?
Yes.
Those two changes. It's the last sentence of the summary page. We have a red line alongside of it.
So in that first paragraph up there, the red line showing the use and possession of marijuana for adults over the age of 21 is what I think you all wanted to insert it, if I understood correctly.
That was your suggestion, Mayor?
I believe so. That's what I said. That's what we had some brief discussion on. So obviously this is not a vote on the ultimate merits, which we need to wait for public hearing on. But just so the public knows what is before them, before us, we'll address this. Councilmember Bernice, is that, now that you see it, is that your motion?
That is my motion.
Okay. Is there a second for that motion? Councilmember Brown. Motion made and seconded to make that amendment in the proposed ballot language. Any discussion on that motion before we go to a vote on the motion? Don't see any, so we'll go ahead and put that to a vote of the council. All in favor of making that change in the proposed language, those two changes actually, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. There's nothing else, council. We'll go to public comment. For members of the public, we've got about 16 minutes before we normally would take a break. I'm not sure we're going to get through public comment in that time period. If it looks like there are only a handful of people, we'll go beyond 7:30 to get those comments in before we take our break. Ask that you come forward, and if you'd like to comment, please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Tell us your name and your address. Ask that you make a line back there so that you can move quickly, and we know exactly how many people would like to comment. So please, at this time, come forward. Pro, con, in between, anything you like. It's all yours. Please come forward. Just tell us your name and address, and keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Well, I guess I'm first. Aubrey Kincaid, 607 Yellowstone. 95,261, 29, 2.8 million. 95,000 deaths annually in the United States from alcohol. We're not talking about bars here. We're talking about cannabis, not marijuana. Marijuana is Spanish for Mary Jane. It's a racist term. Coined in the 30s. Just thought I'd throw that out there. 261, that's how many people die every day from alcohol. 29 years, that's the estimated amount of life loss from these people who died from alcohol poisoning. 2.8 million is the amount of years of estimated life that is just gone from all those people who died early. You know how many people have died from cannabis overdose? In the millennia of history, 0. 0. I just think it's crazy that we're trying to outlaw a plant. It absolutely blows my mind. And we have an opportunity to kind of be a little bit more forward thinking in this town. If someone was stoned, they're probably in a lot more danger of raiding the refrigerator than they are of beating their spouse. Right? Blacking out and forgetting. You don't black out on cannabis alone. You black out on alcohol. But yet we have 0 motions on the floor ever to do anything to outlaw anything in regard to alcohol. Why is that? because it's socially acceptable, it's a big moneymaker, it's fabricated into our society. And Big Pharma is not against it the way they are against cannabis, because Big Pharma recognizes the threat that cannabis is. So many people stop using pain pills when they start using cannabis. I could bring people up here whose lives have been completely changed for the better as a result of cannabis use. Obviously, there are people who don't use it correctly and get into some trouble. But for the most part, there are a lot of people it would blow your mind if you knew who used it here in Billings. I just think that we as a city have an opportunity here. And the whole thing of much of the tax money not staying in here, I think we need to make a motion to change that. I know we can't do it necessarily on this level, but every penny of the tax money that's raised from recreational cannabis that's sold in this town should stay in this town. If other towns in the county want money from it, let them have their own dispensaries. In Billings, we should be using all of that money for what we have. And I'm sure all of you have heard the story of the man who was in a flood and he had to go up to his roof and he asked God to save him. A boat came along and he said, no, I'm waiting for God to save me. Helicopter came along, he said, no, I'm waiting for God to save me. And we've got all these budget shortfalls in Billings and we're like, no, no to cannabis. Well, you can kiss that sweet tax money goodbye if you don't have it here. And as far as the way it's distributed and not all distributed here, we should change that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Patrick Scott Wilson, Ward 5, 2104 Clark Avenue. One second here. I just want to take a moment and just acknowledge that in 2020, the year that was probably the most socially and politically divisive, the one thing Montanans got together and said, yeah, this is the thing that's going to work for us, was passing recreational marijuana. So just want to keep that out there. But this is just a casual observation. I would wager that conservative voters, excuse me, helped to deliver the legalization of recreational marijuana here in Montana. In a state that went from purple to deep red overnight, where Republicans won almost every elected seat they were up for, from governor to dog catcher, it would be a safe assumption to say that the same folks that voted for Gianforte and Daines and Rosendale to office were also the same folks, people that voted to legalize recreational marijuana. So what does the city council and some private interest with deep pockets and a deep agenda and a vendetta have right now? I'm curious, what do you think they're going to accomplish by putting this before the people of Billings, Montana? Billings, the reddest city in this state. You're going to put this to a vote by the people of Billings, and you're going to do one thing. You're going to unify the left and the right to come back to you and say, hey, thanks for wasting our time. Now give us our money back, please. Thank you.
Tanya Ludwig, 378 Jefferson Street, Billings, Montana, 59101. I'm going to tell you a story. Happened July 19th, 2020. I was in Little Caesars Pizza doing a DoorDash order about 8 o'clock in the evening. I get a call. My son moved to California in February. I get a call that night. It was from the Riverside County Coroner's Office. My son was killed at 1:25 in the afternoon that day. And my son was raised here. His name was Eric Ludwig. He was known by a lot of people here. August 3rd of this year, my daughter and I, stand up, April, where are you? Well, we traveled to Riverside, California for the sentencing. This girl, 18 years old at the time, not only had the breakdown of cocaine in her system, but also had marijuana in her system. And it can do things to your mind where you can't be all there when you're driving. So I'm going to tell you what she did to my son. My son was sitting, eating his lunch, plain view, where he could be seen, because I also went to the accident scene where it happened at. She ran him down, didn't know she ran him over. He was pinned under the car. He was killed instantly. And for what that gentleman just said, that you can't be impaired, that's wrong. I no longer have my 22-year-old son anymore. And recreational marijuana, we do not need in this town. Because it's gonna make more work for your police officers. You gotta think of that. Think of your law enforcement officers and think about the kids that can try to get it from other people if it goes recreational. There's gonna be people trying to sell it on the streets as well.
And Tanya, go ahead and finish up.
So please, we do not need marijuana recreational here. We do not need it. And I'm gonna let you know what this girl got. She got 365 days in jail and 2 years probation for killing my son. Plus 3 years suspended driver's license. I want you guys to think about that. I sure wouldn't want you guys to get the phone call that your child has been killed. 'Cause it sure it hurts when you had to bury your child first. And my kid was a loving, caring individual. And even someone else knows him in this room. And St. John, you knew my son. You knew my son from other things. My son also worked here in Billings. And he was a graduate of Billings Senior High School. And he was a news fan of Q2 News.
Thank you, Tanya. We sincerely mourn your loss and understand as best we can.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Please come forward. Go ahead and make a line in the back so we know, again, who'd like to comment.
Hello, Mayor, council people. Steve Zabawa with Safe Montana, 324 South 24th Street. I want to thank the admin team here and the administrator and so forth and the staff on recommending approval to put it on the ballot. Now, the number one thing is that was the ballot fair, I-190? Was it fair and even and accurate? And I filed a lawsuit against it because it was unconstitutional, in my opinion, that it was appropriating and allocating money, which it does and did. And that was one of the main reasons why those conservative Republicans and anybody else that wanted bigger fish in their streams or veteran services to be funded thought, hey, let's just go ahead and tax this and then move forward. It's going to be a good thing. The negative is that you got Tanya is a perfect example of what the negative is. If you look at the HIDA report that came out from 2020 from Denver, Colorado, you have twice as many deaths with DUIs with marijuana than we used to have before it was legalized. So in 6 years, the death count doubles from, da-da-da-da-da-da. And then the emergency room is impacted in a big way because kids, unsuspecting children, dogs, and other people and adults eat gummy bears, ice cream, and brownies and so forth that they're not aware that there's a THC content in there because it's just laying around the house. So heavy impact there, emergency room, the DUIs, and then the deaths they mount up. So you got to really be careful. The problem by putting drugstores that have marijuana in them that are highly sophisticated on our street corners in Billings is that normally each age bracket goes up dramatically in usage because it's just easier to get to. They're pushing it, you know, whether you want to call them pushers or not. The bottom line is that's their business. They want to sell as much as they can, and they want our families to do it. Okay, and now the problem is that 1 out of 10 people that start doing it become addicted to it for the rest of their life. All right, so you got to keep that in mind as you move forward on this. I just would recommend that you put it on the ballot. Just give it a free opportunity for the people in Billings to, with no, right now, the way it's written right now, it's not slanted either way. The first one was slanted and it was never vetted. Okay, the Attorney General didn't vet it, and neither did Safe Montana, because it was during COVID. We didn't even know it was going out there. Before we knew it, it was out on the streets getting signed, and then they got their signatures, and then the people voted on it. And if it was a fair deal and it was accurate, I wouldn't have any problem with that. But that's the problem, you know, it wasn't fair, it wasn't accurate, and now it is in this one. So I think if you put it up to the city of Billings, I believe a majority of the people will not vote in favor of it. I believe they'll prohibit it, and that's your cheapest way to regulate it. If there's none of them, you don't have to go into all that extra effort. Okay, so thank you for your time and effort, and appreciate each one of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hello, I'm Anthony Sauer, 911 Miles Avenue. And I attended the talk by Ben Court over at the library on Thursday, and he gave us all some great information, but there really wasn't enough time to talk about marijuana in a fair manner. His talk was centered around increasing potencies on ethical advertising practices and kind of made marijuana look a lot worse than it really is. And there's a lot of fear around it, but it's mostly because people just don't have enough experience with it. They don't have the education that they need on it. Don't get me wrong, there's definitely been people that had bad experience with it, but there's not one of us in this room that hasn't seen somebody with a bad experience because they've had one or a few too many beers. We've already voiced our opinion and we want recreational marijuana here. We don't need to be wasting taxpayer dollars to host another vote when we've already spoken. Some information I want to just give you is coming right out of Colorado. It's a report that was released 8 years after legalization. And some of the stuff that this report showed was that marijuana-related court filings dropped 55% from the years 2012 to 2019. The Healthy Kids Colorado survey indicated no significant change in the past 30-day use of marijuana between 2013 and 2019. No significant use increase. Juvenile arrests decreased from 37% between 2012 and 2019. All good things, sounds like. Furthermore, a comprehensive analysis was done by the National Bureau of Economic Research in Cambridge, Massachusetts. They collected data in all 50 states as well as the District of Columbia to, and I quote, comprehensively explore the broader impact of recreational marijuana laws, providing some of the first evidence on how legalization is affecting illicit drug use, heavy alcohol use, arrests for drug-related overdose deaths, and admissions into the substance abuse treatment services. And they determined, again, I quote, "We find little compelling evidence to suggest that recreational marijuana laws result in an increase in illicit drug use, arrests for Part 1 violent offenses, drug-related overdose, or drug-related treatment admissions for addiction. Our findings provide key evidence evaluating the ongoing and occasionally contentious political debate on legalizing marijuana use and inform on if recreational marijuana use is a gateway to addiction, to harder drug use and criminal behavior." They also cite other sources to then back up their claims. In summary, Colorado shows that those court filings have dropped, which lowers administrative costs, and there's no reason to suggest that that would not happen here. Kids are not using any more than before, and juvenile arrests have decreased 37%. No increase in violent crime. They can't even find significant evidence to show recreational marijuana use increases hard drug use or alcohol use. There's also strong evidence that it increases home value. Bringing legitimate tax-paying businesses into the city helps drive out both crime and the black market sales that already plague this industry. Billings has a hard enough time with crime and drug use, and recreational marijuana is a win for everybody. Whether you use it or not, you'll see improvements in your roads, your schools, and ultimately your neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the City Council and Mayor Cole. My name is Dan Wells, and I reside at
5847 Whispering Woods Drive in Billings, Montana. I hope that you will put this initiative back on the ballot. I think with better understanding, there will be a different outcome in our city's opinion. I'm not in favor of big business recreational marijuana shops dictating and making enticing advertisements to our community for a drug. I recognize there's many good uses for medical marijuana, and even many people can use marijuana recreationally and pull away from it. I deal in the segment of the society often that can't pull away from it. I've been a builder in the city of Billings for almost 30 years now, and I've seen many of our good subcontractors, their ability to work, their ability to function go down as their drug addictions increase. And the marijuana, it seems like today, is way more potent than it was years ago. The other two negative effects I see is, one, it deals with our workforce. Two, monthly there are police at our different job sites taking crime reports of theft, and in almost every instance they tell us the crime that we are dealing with is a derivative of drugs. Lastly, we've had two families move to Billings this year from Portland, Oregon. Both of them indicated that part of the reason they left their beautiful country was they could no longer live where marijuana had been legalized, and the recreational aspects of it drove their quality of life to the point that they left. So I appreciate the opportunity to voice my opinion and hope that you will put it back on the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Sid. Thank you, Council. My name is Dennis Alvasid, 78 27th Street West, apartment number 122. Since we're talking about marijuana, I'm a Vietnam veteran. And you know what our number one drug was, as they say back then? It was cannabis. I've smoked about every cannabis you can think of. Every single one of cannabis you can think of. And, you know, on this medical and this marijuana plus the other, which is natural marijuana, I do believe that we should just leave it as is. I just wanted to reiterate, we go back to the prohibition and drinking and everything like that. And we all know what happened to prohibition. And we're still drinking today. And that's fine. But one gentleman before, I want to emphasize, cannabis did not kill anybody. Cannabis did not kill anybody. Once again, I want to reiterate what we need here to rehabilitate the people. It's certain people that can get this drug, cannabis, and it will affect them. It depends upon the person. And what we need to do in Billings here is to rehabilitate and get more things like a Rimrock Foundation so we can get the patient back to recovery. But once again, I want to reiterate that, once again, cannabis does not kill. It could be the person. And I've smoked about every cannabis that there is. And, you know, we used to joke about the different kinds from like cannabis from Hawaii. We used to call that Maui Wowie, you know, from Hawaii, just the different kinds. But it depends on each person on how it's going to affect them. And that's the same with a person. You don't want to put a drug person in jail because that's going to affect them, their mental state. Once again, let's just leave it as is and go with the cannabis, because this is what's going to happen. It'll just do the same as prohibition, drinking. We got over that. We're drinking today. And it's to certain people that get rehabilitated that need it. Not everybody needs it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Council members, Mr. Mayor, my name is Jason Smith, 4515 Palisades Park. I just wanted to say that I'm kind of amazed, actually, that so little is known and so much is trying to be decided immediately. This has, you're talking about safety and numbers and dollar amounts. To be a little bit more exact, sales will be tenfold what they are from medical to recreational the first year. That is an average on every state that has passed it. Then with us bordering Wyoming, North Dakota, and so forth, and let's say Muscle County, where it did not pass, you have those people coming here spending their money and their dollars, and those tax dollars go here. To put this on the ballot, I read that it was up to about $20,000. If we're so concerned about that, where is this money coming from? This is about generating money. I'm sorry to hear that that lady lost her son, but it's going to be in this county and in the city one way or another, even on a recreational level. And the whole idea is to be able to control it and regulate it. Otherwise, you're going to have people doing it for you. This is about where people do get caught. It's about big business. The criminal system and justice system is big business. You're talking about ankle monitors, probation officers, court costs. Those fees, those employ people and create jobs. The crime rate, sure, there's going to be things that go up because there's a value to it. But it's not because there's people smoking pot that's stealing cars. It's meth heads stealing pot and stealing cars and driving them through pot shops. So I know we've heard a lot of moving testimony. Even last week, or maybe the week before, I heard testimony of people complaining about shopping in San Francisco and smelling nothing but feces and marijuana. You know what? This is about Billings. The voters have already spoken. The money has been spent. And here we're addressing this when I believe medical is still on the table and has not been addressed. All these things seem to apply, but you have left out and you say it doesn't apply to medical. Just leaves me questioning what's legal in this town and what's not legal in this town. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next.
Good evening. I'm David Lewis, 2980 Daystar. I appreciate the work you do. It's difficult, and I appreciate that you're having to balance issues as you consider language and other things that we've seen this evening, and I appreciate your time very much. Years ago, I saw a cartoon that had a chicken and a pig, and in that cartoon it said, "Who gives more to breakfast?" And obviously chickens give eggs, but pigs give their lives. In my home, I have raised 5 children, and although I rocked the cradle and was a very diligent father, I will tell you my wife put forth a lot more effort than I did, and I appreciate that. In addition, in that effort, we are now the grandparents of 5 small children. As parents and grandparents, we took special care to protect our children. Years ago, we saw the dramatic expansion of the medical marijuana cards being distributed to primarily 21-year-old males. Steve Zabawa and I and a few other people found out about this and took action and began a petition drive and began creating a fuss. And as we created a fuss, I got to know lots of Billings people. And as I was taking petitions and having fun with the getting to know people, it was the mothers who spoke the loudest. It was the mothers who were most angry at what their children were doing. In many cases, adult children. But they just saw how destructive it was to them. Now, in the state of Montana, it is legal to have recreational marijuana and to use it. And we understand that. Question is if I'm given a chance again, having seen what has happened again, to vote to say no to non-medical, to recreational marijuana facilities in Billings, I will say no. I look forward to that opportunity, and I ask you to give me that opportunity. Again, I appreciate your time, appreciate your counsel with regards to considering the drafting of this. I hope that the language found therein does not confuse people to think that we are restricting the availability of medical marijuana to individuals who are in seeking of it. But I do hope that I'm given the chance, along with many of my friends, and there are many, many, who would say no to seeing facilities selling marijuana for recreational purposes. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next.
Mayor Cole and City Council, my name is Dick Pence. I live at 4307 Palisades Park Drive. My emphasis in my life the last few years is trying to sort out truth from error. And I think it was Mark Twain that said something to the effect of, there are lies, darn lies, used another word, and statistics. And my point is, you can use, and I've had a lot of statistics in my background, worked in research, you can use statistics to prove about anything you want to. My concern tonight is that you think about this. There's an old adage that says policy promotes practice. What's that mean? It simply means that when you legalize something, when you say it's right from a political standpoint, people that are maybe not thinking very well, or the average citizen, Joe Sixpack, whoever you want to call him, tends to think that just because there's a policy, that that's a good thing. That's the thing to do. I'm against the use of marijuana. I hope you'll put this on the ballot and let the city and the state, the Yellowstone County vote on this. But I have another concern too, and that's this. We live in a culture, if you're paying attention, to where science can mean a lot of different things. And so many times we're seeing now so-called scientists are a lot more moved by their own opinions than they are by true science. Think about that as you think about this particular issue. You've heard some red herrings tonight. Sort those out and do the right thing for Billings. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comment? Just a reminder, we do want to take a break, so don't be sitting there if you're, I don't see anybody in line. Are we done? I guess not. Okay. Is this our last speaker? Because again, I don't see anybody in the line. Go ahead.
Okay. Tina Walker-Smith, 4100 Murphy Avenue. I'm actually going to be really short and just bring in the Yellowstone County Commissioners' quote from their meeting last time, and those that say that they didn't get a vote, that they want their vote. We've had this vote 4 times now, once for recreational, and it's been approved. So in the infamous words now of the county commissioner, I don't think you get to revote when you don't like the outcome of the election. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments? Didn't mean to shut you down, but I meant to shut you down if there's nobody else. Okay, we will close the public hearing then. Council will take a break. Thank you for your extra patience, but I think that was worth at least getting that through. So thank you very much. We'll come back at as close to 5 minutes as we can. So it's 7:43. We'll recommence around 7:50.
What about that?
Okay, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for members of the public for your input and for council for your discussion. Back to the council. Council, do we have any other questions for staff? Do we have motions, whatever? How would you like to proceed? Councilmember Ewald.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion that we put this resolution on the ballot with the changes that Gina made to it tonight. And if it goes up or down, it doesn't make a lot of difference. We still have to, if it goes down, we still got to regulate it.
You need a second to start.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Sure. Is there a second on the motion? Councilmember Purington? Okay, we have a motion made and seconded. It is in favor of the proposed amended language going on the ballot. Discussion on the motion. Councilmember Purington, I think you had a request at break to see if the chief wanted to comment. I don't know if he is still around. We'll keep our eyes open for him. So other discussion on the motion. Council, how do you want to proceed? Councilmember Purington?
So Shane, is he coming back, or do you know?
I don't believe so, no. Okay, I'll go back to those who made the motion in the second to start the discussion then. Councilmember Ewald?
Thank you, Mayor. It's, we got enough problems in town the way it is now. If this stops, I don't know how many times I've heard sitting in this chair, we got casinos on every corner. We don't want dispensaries on every corner. It's just, it's the wrong way to go, I think. And I think that, like Mr. Zabota said, it was sold as a big package, Christmas package under a Christmas tree. And people go, oh man, if we vote for this, this is what we get. And then after the legislature worked it over, it changed a lot of those things. And so if we just let the big package under the Christmas tree go, that might be the last Christmas, because it's going to cost us a lot of money to enforce this stuff in the city. So that's my reasons for it.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Purington?
Thank you. And I wrote some remarks down because I didn't really want to forget them. One of the things was that $9.2 million total was brought into the state from out-of-state activists, pro-legalization activists. And so what they also did, they brought in promises of huge sums of revenue. Our state legislature followed that will of the voters, which was to legalize marijuana. That's what that vote primarily was. Sadly, our legislators fell for the money grab to add to the coffers of the state with very little balanced education. Little consideration was given for the fallout from law enforcement perspective and also to empirical data regarding the science behind marijuana. There is data from Colorado, Washington, Oregon, and California, which is very detailed in the ill effects of legalizing this drug, not only on personal health, but also an increase in various criminal activities. The sin taxes, which are alcohol, gambling, smoking, and now recreational marijuana, all lead to exacerbation of these activities. Or, excuse me, of addictive behaviors. I will not say all become addictive who use these products, but who? Municipalities get a piddling of whatever the state is paid from these recreational activities, yet the city of Billings will be left holding the bag with enforcement and with health issues. Which brings me to the next point. Who will pay for this huge chunk of the promised revenue to the state that we are supposedly going to receive? Billings' portion could be close to $26,000, given the estimates that even the city administrator gave us. it's all an unknown, and he made that comment. It is unknown. So who else will pay? You, the citizens of Billings, will pay because your property taxes will go up in order to cover the mental health issues which are covered in the state, or in the county, I'm sorry, and also for law enforcement issues, which will also be covered within the city. And that's not to mention the hospital services, the emergency services that are all predicted due to the other data that comes from these other states. Lastly, for those who claim a libertarian view of government staying out of this issue, government is in this issue, and they have been in this issue, and they're not going to give up their piece of the pie. But what it will do is that it will simply grow bigger government, because you will have regulations. If the ballot language does not pass, or not the language, but if the ballot doesn't pass, there will be regulation, and that too will grow government. So I urge people to be educated. We will, if this passes tonight, we will educate, take opportunities to educate the public. A balance. We need a balance. And that they did not get that balance. So I asked the other council members to please to go ahead and vote to put this on the ballot, and let's get a balanced response. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion, Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As some people may be aware, when this was brought as direction to staff and a subcommittee, a committee was formed, I voted against it because at the time I said the voters have already decided. If we ask the voters to decide something and they choose something, it's up to us, the people who are getting the big bucks, to figure out how to deal with it, how to regulate it, how to keep our community safe. And I understand that, and I have renders my heart very broken to hear the story of you losing your son. That's absolutely a very important aspect, how we keep our community safe. But if we're going to ask voters to vote again, do we also ask them to vote again for the public safety mill levy or the charter? Where do we draw a line and say, this is what the public has voted? I don't know, because if you just continue to vote, I don't know what happens when it turns. The other concern I have is that 36 states already have some form of cannabis regulation, recreational cannabis regulation. The federal government at some point, and Congress has legislation in the hopper to come to terms with this. We could wake up one morning and the Supreme Court will have taken all of what we've thought was our approach to this and make it toast. I mean, really, the Supreme Court can do that. So I think the best way for us to move forward is realize that the voters have spoken, and now how do we, as policymakers, how do we, as the people who are getting the big bucks to decide this, really regulate things? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion, Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I don't want to say that I'm not compelled to go one way or another on this, because I kind of am. I know that there's going to be more cost than what I believe there would be to monitoring, maintaining, enforcing, and we have a lot of work ahead of us developing the regulations. If this were to pass, that only takes off one more of the 7. You know, there's still going to be growers, cultivators, delivery, all of those kinds of things that we're going to have to regulate. And I think that our time really needs to be spent there, developing those regulations and figuring out how we're going to manage this and how we're going to cover those costs. I absolutely agree. $250,000 a year isn't going to cover trying to maintain this and monitor it and enforce it. And the police, you know, added efforts there. You know, we don't even have a way to test for DUIs for this yet. There's a lot of other complicated issues here. But I will say that I will support this simply because I think people do understand that there is more cost to this than what we anticipated up front. I don't think we're going to get the return from the state that we originally anticipated. I just don't think we're going to be a Colorado. They made some serious revenues, and they've had to overcome some serious issues as well, and are still trying to overcome those. If this passes, that's one more that comes off the list. So medical marijuana and dispensaries, we still have the other 5 that we have to deal with. Just keep that in mind. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion. Councilor Purton?
I just wanted to make a comment. Sean, it's $250,000 for 4 years. It's not individual years. Is that correct?
Mayor and Council, Councilmember Purington, actually that is the annual. That is the estimate of the annual on the 4th or 5th year. I could be off on my years, but it is the annual by the 4th or 5th year.
Thank you. Councilmember Ronning, you had your hand up.
Thank you. This was a hard decision before, and it's a hard decision now. I get really irritated when people politicize things like this. And it happens from both sides of the aisle. Both Democrats and Republicans politicize this issue, and that really bothers me. This should not be a political issue. This is an issue that is dealing with a drug. And just like we've heard people come up and talk to us about alcohol, which that is not what this vote is, but we've heard repeatedly the ills of alcohol. Well, yeah, there are ills in alcohol. I wish we could go back in time and change the way it was voted on then, but I wasn't there. I'm bothered that the state of Montana didn't do their job. It was a state vote. The state of Montana should have made it a uniform state law, but they didn't. They punted it to counties and cities. And that bothers me. That really irritates me that our state legislators did not do their job. And let's be clear, this is a drug. If it weren't a drug, can you stop it right now? Let's just stop it right now then. But it is a drug. It is a drug that people take because they want to change something within their life. This is a drug. I am fully supportive of medical marijuana. Absolutely fully support that. But I do think that the voters did not vote on HB 701, which came out of the state legislature. They voted on ballot initiative 190, 11 sentences. The state took those 11 sentences and quite frankly created chaos in our state. So now we're going to have this patchwork of laws throughout our state. Are we going to get the millions and millions and millions of dollars of revenue that come in to address the issues that are going to come because of this? No, we're not going to. That's not the way the state even set it up. They set it up so we won't get it. Again, if you can tell I'm not happy with our state legislature, I'm not happy with our state legislature. I'm also not happy that our federal government isn't taking this on. They punted it to what they consider and what many consider to be the lowest form of government. We get $600 a month. So I've said it before and I'll say it again, I do believe that the people have the right to a voice. If we prevent that voice from happening in November, we remove that voice. It becomes right here that makes that decision for everyone. Do we have to regulate this, period? Yes, we do. It is our job to regulate it. And yes, Councilwoman Joy, we do have to vote over and over again on a public safety mill levy. We do have to vote over and over again on a city charter. Yes, that is what we have to do. So I am about having the people have a voice. If those that voted on it want it again, then you will be assured that you're going to get it again. Those same people will probably say, yes, we want legal dispensaries. There shouldn't be a fear of that. If you think that that's how the people are going to vote once they get all the information. This has been a miserable decision. But yes, I'm going to support this.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion, Councilmember Shaw?
Thank you. I mean, I have to echo what everyone says. Yes, very difficult. I appreciated the work the committee did to really narrow this down. I think that that was a really smart move. I'm really struggling with this one for two reasons. First, 2020 was a much bigger election than what this will be. So in my opinion, we had a lot more public participation already last year than we will have in the municipal election coming up. So if we're talking about hearing the voices of the people, I have to rely on that larger election, which is much more representative than what we know a municipal election will be. So that piece is very troubling to me. The other piece is that 100% agree, 3% is not going to be anywhere near enough to deal with all of the problems we have. Which is why I'm trying to look at this holistically as where are we going to get the revenue that we need to address these problems? So to me, I'm looking at the ancillary businesses that are going to be supporting a lot of these businesses as they come into the city. That raises tax revenue in a different way than just a straight excise 3% sales tax. So to me, that's a really important piece. And I hate to think of council moving in the same direction that we have historically in the past done with medical. I heard a lot of these same arguments. I've heard this my whole life about medical. And now it seems like we've kind of shifted to the same arguments, but about recreational, and I get that. But I think there has been a change that has happened in Montana over the last 20 years, let's say, 15, 20 years. And I would like to honor that. So for that reason, I'm not going to be supporting that, but I hope I've made clear why. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. This has been a tough decision, and I was on the committee, and I will be on the committee for the regulations. I hope it is, as we learn more about this. And Penny, I agree with you, it is a drug. I do think that this belongs at the federal level. It should be regulated that way. But we are here to make a decision on it. I think when we first talked about bringing these ideas, having the staff bring this to us, it was because the state did change what was passed. They gave an option. They split it up. It was a one vote on all these different businesses into really saying, well, listen, this is made up of multiple businesses. Do you want any? You can ask if you want any of those. And I think giving that, and as the committee talked about it, the recreational was probably the most controversial one of any of them. And so I think given, as you say, giving the people the vote on this one issue, we'll hear what they say. I hear what you're saying about the election being, national election as a much stronger presence, but I think the representation is still going to be there on both sides of what we get. So I will support this moving forward, and we'll hear what the people have to say this November when it's presented.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilmember Trickey.
Sadly, marijuana politics has been political for at least the last 90 years, but certainly for the last 50 years. The war on drugs that Richard Nixon started in 1971, the very first thing he did was to put together a federal commission to go and look at the whole situation of drugs in the country. An ex-governor from Pennsylvania named Schaefer was put in charge of it, and they went out and they talked to every expert that they could find, and they came back with a report that pissed Richard Nixon off, because they said that the federal government really is not standing in the right place by putting marijuana and heroin as a Schedule I drug. Schedule I drugs are drugs that have no medical redeeming value and are addictive. And what the Schaefer report said about that is that there were potentially medical redeeming things about marijuana. Heroin is the basis for every frickin' opiate that we have out there. I mean, every painkiller that we're doing is based on that. But these two things were put aside and said, no, we're going to make it there. Now, I'm not going to get into the reasons why it happened. I mean, but it was political. It was political from the very beginning. And if you stop and you listen to the arguments that are continuing to be said even today, you hear that they are more emotional and they are not about the actual data. I went looking for current data, and the one most interesting spot that I found was actually the Cato Institute, which didn't surprise me, having been a libertarian a long time ago. And they came out with a report that basically said three things. The statistics and the data that are out there are being exaggerated by both sides. As they looked at the data, they only found two things that were significant. One was that the suicide rate in the states where marijuana had been legalized was trending down slightly. And the other point that they said was that revenue was going up really high because of it. And their recommendation, it's the Cato Institute after all, take the revenue and run. Okay, but let's back off to that other point that's in there. Why would the suicide rate go down? The studies that they looked at said that it was because people who were stressed, and who isn't stressed these days, were switching from alcohol, which was legal, to marijuana, which now was legal. And what was happening is that the depressive nature of alcohol was driving the suicides in a lot of these people. Now, it's it's only a couple of states. It's a very small statistics. It was just barely significant, but it lays open the fact that, yeah, it's a drug. There are tons of drugs. We have drugs all over the frickin' place. Some of them we manage, some of them we don't. We made this one illegal for political reasons. And this is the real reason why I always hated marijuana laws. It's because it's a social justice issue. It's not just about the effects that the drugs have on individuals and that the drugs have on people and their lives. Prohibition has an impact on people's lives. Putting someone in jail has an impact on someone's lives. Making somebody go to prison or be, having a felony on their record because of a pot possession. I was reading an article. One of the people that Donald Trump gave clemency to last January was someone who was in jail for possession of marijuana for a lifetime. He was in jail for he was sentenced to an entire lifetime. Why? Because 3 strikes. So he got hit 3 times for marijuana possession, and he got a sentence of life plus 10 years. Whatever else you can say about Donald Trump, he gave that guy clemency. Now what happens? He goes back home to New York, and he can't get a job because he's got a record. He gets offered a job in North Carolina, but his parole officer won't let him move because who knows why? The bureaucracy couldn't handle the paperwork, whatever. So that person couldn't move to North Carolina, where he had a job waiting for him, and somebody who was going to help him get back on his feet. And then what happened is that his parole officer came to visit, and what happens? A friend of his had loaned him a car so that he could get around. If you've ever lived in central New York, it's just like here in Montana. If you don't have a car, you can't get anywhere. Well, it turns out his friend had a felony record. So what happened to this guy? He's back in prison right now. Prohibition has consequences. And what pisses me off about this entire conversation is, ooh, drugs are bad. Well, prohibition is bad too. There are consequences in both ways. And there are literally tens of millions of people in this country who are in prison because of something that we call a felony right now, which is basically a recreational drug. And that just really, really ticks me off. And I believe what's finally happening in this country is that the experience of individuals as they're dealing with these different drugs are giving them what they really need to do is an understanding that different drugs have different impacts on different people. And I've been saying from the very beginning that what we need to do is to deal with the underlying unhappiness that people have, which leads them to do drugs, to watch too much TV, to play video games, to go and gamble. I mean, yes, there are very unhappy people in our world right now, and they do tons of things in order to escape that unhappiness. And making something illegal or even just harder to get your hands on isn't going to make them happy. It will make some of them a hell of a lot more unhappy. So bottom line, marijuana is legal and will be legal on January 1st in Billings. The usage of it, the growing of it, as an individual, you can grow it. I'm sure that, you know, when you've got 4 plants and you're growing 4 plants, some of them are going to be selling it to their friends or giving it to their friends or trading them in August for that huge zucchini that they overgrew that's on there. All of that is going to happen. What will happen if we don't step up and try to, and make the sale of this illegal is we're going to keep all of that in the black market. And that has huge consequences. That's when you see, you know, stuff coming in from all over the place. That's when you see people getting rich who are basically criminals. So, you know what? Stop punting this. This is not a hard decision. This is just what we need to do. Let's step forward, let's regulate it.
That's okay. Go ahead. Please restrain yourselves. Okay, I think everybody has spoken on the issue except for mine, so we're close to a vote. I need to weigh in here. Many of those social ills that Councilor Tricky identified, I'm sure exist, but I think it's very important that he acknowledged at the end that issues of criminalization really are not relevant to this. This is only about the prohibition of dispensaries. Use and possession is going to be legal starting in January 1st. It's also going to be available for sale in the county, meaning like 10 feet or 10 inches from our boundary. And so that begs the question about whether putting this on the ballot, even if approved, will have any real effect. I grant you that. But I share the concerns of many of those. I am no expert by any means, but I've heard it from enough of our local healthcare providers who have dealt with this issue for many, many years that they are very concerned about the effect of marijuana on especially young developing brains, the effect of modern potencies in the distillates to, even if no one has died, there seems to be a growing consensus that there is a very real psychological addiction that can occur, at least in some cases. And there also seems to be no real argument that there are going to be law enforcement impacts from impairment, especially when it comes to DUIs, and a very difficult situation of how we objectively measure impairment. So those are all reasons to be cautious and very concerned about what this may mean for our state, even though the horse has largely left the barn. But I do have respect for the county or for the voters. And so the big issue for me was, have the voters spoken? They've spoken on something, there's no doubt about that. They did pass legalization by a significant margin in the state and here in the city. And I think that's their general will. And even if this goes on the ballot, I think there's a very real question whether it will pass. My betting would probably be that it will not pass, but I don't know. But what I am pretty confident about is they didn't vote on specifically this issue of dispensaries. They voted on I-190, which was, I counted 148 words, including fors, thes, ofs, and everything else. very little substance. General broad concept, yes. But a lot of the detail that the legislature came out of after a lot of thought and discussion is new for our voters. House Bill 701, this version, even though it includes some redlining, and so the actual version would be a little bit shorter, comes to up 143 pages. About the same number of pages as there were words in I-90. So it's a very different animal. And so I do not feel comfortable inserting my judgment for the judgment of those voters on this question of dispensaries. I'd like to hear what the voters have to say, because whatever happens here is likely going to set the course of our policy maybe for the next 30 or 40 years. And I don't want Steve Zabala back there saying to me, well, why didn't you let the voters really tell us exactly what they want? So I will vote in favor of this. Don't know what the result will be. I don't think it's a great burden. We're gonna have a ballot anyway. This will add some degree of additional clarity. The cost is relatively modest. So we'll hear from the voters on the specific issue, and I think that will add some clarity going forward. Those are my thoughts. If there's nothing else, we'll proceed to a vote. Are we ready to proceed to a vote? Okay, I think everybody's spoken, so we know what the vote is going to be, but Denise, I'd already asked to put this in a random order for us to vote, just in case there was any last minute strategizing going on. Denise, do you have a way to call for the vote in any sort of random form?
I do, Mayor. I have a little cup here with everybody's name on it, and I will just draw from the cup.
All right, very good. Then
my cup will not runneth over. Are we ready?
We're ready.
Okay. Councilmember Brown, you'll start us.
Aye.
Mayor Cole?
Aye.
Councilmember Neese?
Aye.
Councilmember Purington?
Aye.
Councilmember Joy?
Nay.
Councilmember Chiriki?
Nay.
Councilmember Ronning?
Aye.
Councilmember Shaw?
Nay.
That leaves you, Councilmember Ewalt?
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Thank you very much. Motion passes 6-3. We're 2 council members down, but they cannot vote by our rules unless they're physically present, for anybody who was curious about that. Thank you very much. That concludes then item number 3, and our regular agenda will move to public comment on items that were not on our agenda this evening. Is there any public comment on non-agenda items? If so, please come forward, come to the podium. You'll have 3 minutes. I just ask you to give us your name and address. Any public comment on non-agenda items tonight? Is there any public comment on non-agenda items? I'm not seeing any, so we will close the public comment period on non-agenda items. Council initiatives. Councilmember Chiriki.
So first off, I'd like to ask staff, if we want to direct you at this point to spend money on incentives or anything on COVID in order to help John out, what would the process be at this point? I mean, I know we're no longer in a state of emergency on that, so I think that changes it somewhat. Essentially, what I want to do is to direct staff to set aside $300,000 to work with the county and the public health commissioner and local media and whatnot to, one, try to get the word out that people need to get vaccinated, and two, do something about incentives.
So Councilmember Chiriki, Mayor and Council, my recommendation there you'd have at least 2 steps to the process. Number one, talking about six figures, you're going to talk about a budget amendment. Now, we have ARPA funds, so, you've got a source there that's clearly legal according to, the funds coming through. But there would be an amendment to spend that kind of money. And I think ultimately, that's what would be helpful for Andy and I, and ultimately in working with John Felton, who is our city, county chief health officer, CEO, president, to work with him and as to how best to invest in accomplishing the goal of the council in that regard. So whether you want to do it, you could do it through an initiative being approved by a majority of the council, or you could ask that John and I come back to you with a set of recommendations as to how would you spend upwards of that kind of money. The help would be to know, do a majority of council want to move that way before we spend a lot of time on anything of that kind of substance?
That's kind of what I was thinking is, so probably then I would start out by just making a motion to do the budget amendment and direct staff to bring us a budget amendment and start conversations with county health officials and whatnot about how best to use those funds as soon as possible. Does that cover all your concerns?
Ultimately, you're putting a motion, if I heard you right, we're going to find out whether we have a majority of council wants to work in that direction or not.
Yeah.
Bill?
Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. I don't disagree with this at all, but can I ask that we see something in writing first before we vote on it? I would like to have the chance to do that, please.
Do you want the words in writing for the motion?
Yep.
Okay, further discussion. Who did I see? Councilmember Denise.
Yeah, I think this is time for initiative, so if there's going to be initiative, I would recommend you make a motion for initiative, and then we can all vote on it. Otherwise, I would ask Mayor to move on.
Fine. So the question a little bit is, do you want to actually make it tonight, Councilmember Tricky, or give it more detail and I don't want to say you haven't given it thought, but really spell out the details, come back in 2 weeks with a more detailed line item?
I don't know that we would come up with a more detailed line item in 2 weeks. Honestly, I think what would happen is that whatever money we set aside, they will find the best use that they can for whatever money they actually set aside. Silverbow County set aside $1 million of their ARPA funds for this very thing. To me, it's not about specifically what I'm asking them to do. It's
Mayor,
about,
point of order.
Let's set up and...
Well, let's Councilmember Tricky finish. Go ahead.
Yeah, let's set aside some money that can be used in order to get more people vaccinated before we have to shut down the schools.
Okay. All right. Back to, I recognize Councilmember Ronning. I assume whatever issue you had, Councilmember Nice, is now done because Councilmember Tricky is done. Councilmember Ronning.
Thank you. I was just going to request that we stay in the process of the initiative, that you say to council you're going to be bringing an initiative, you get that form filled out, you work with staff, put details in that form and bring it back as an initiative, but we've all seen the form ahead of time, so we understand, and you write out detailed what you'd like, so.
I emailed the form, I thought. I emailed it out on Friday.
Oh. No, I didn't get anything. Oh.
Sounds like Councilmember Nice did.
Oh.
Today or yesterday, maybe it was.
Oh, I'll have to go look, because I don't think I got any, but I'll go look.
Okay. And I've been gone, so if I got one, I apologize, but I have not personally seen it. But is the, okay, Councilmember Brown will have to come back to see whether we have an actual motion in front of us.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. If we're going to make a motion, let's just make it and move on.
Okay. So Councilmember Tricky, it's kind of back to you. I don't know if you have something very specific for us. If so, we'll see if there's a second. If there is, then we'll vote her up or down. If not, we can come back to it at a later meeting.
What I said in the initiative form was to set aside $300,000 to direct staff to set aside $300,000 to work with the county health officials in the county and local media in order to increase the vaccination rate in Billings as soon as possible.
Okay, so that is that's the motion.
Yeah.
Whatever was in written form. And is there a second? Yes, second by Councilmember Joy. So we have a motion and a second. Discussion now on that motion. Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I was just hurriedly looking through my email, and I don't think I saw it. I'm sorry about that. If it came on Friday, maybe I'm sorry if it came earlier. I didn't see it. Based on what we know and has been testified to, incentives do work. Even in this community, they did work. And I think that there's a tremendous amount of education that has to go into everything that we consider here at council. In particular, I think that there are ways that we can reach those members of our community to encourage them to get vaccinated. I'm thinking of two people who have absolutely no hesitancy, no problems with it. They simply have been busy and haven't done it. Maybe that incentive is part of what they need to take that day off, that couple of hours off from work and actually go forward and get them. I think there are people who probably don't have a lot of reasons why they don't do it, other than their life is busy. Hey, they just don't have time for it. And maybe a cash incentive, as was testified to, is a motivation for them to come forward. And it would be, if you consider the cost, as the mayor did the research, the cost of having somebody hospitalized would far, far outspend what we might use as an incentive and an education program. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just speak in favor of the concept, but against the details. This is, I think, critically important, and I think it's well to use a good use of ARPA dollars. If it's really, ARPA was intended to get rid of COVID, and we haven't gotten rid of it. So I really support the concept, including of using dollars for incentives. But I'm a little concerned about the detail. I think we need to proceed cautiously. I haven't personally seen the initiative form. There may be some question about whether it was distributed. So I think we should come back in 2 weeks with a more detailed proposal. I think it would be good to add to that proposal some direction to staff that they specifically communicate with the county about whether the county would help participate in this, because they got $33 million or something like that in ARPA dollars, and I'd like to make that a very specific part of this. Also, I think we need to direct city attorney's office to give us update on what our role will be on public health restrictions after the legislature. A lot of that has been taken away from the public health department and put on our shoulders. But I, for one, am kind of very fuzzy about what our rights and obligations are. And as part of this, this is a critical time, I think, to get up to speed, because we may not have the luxury of a lot of time if this really hits the fan. As for the dollar amount, I'd probably be inclined to try to remove the exact dollar amount, because I don't know what's needed. But my gut tells me that's not bad. I mean, that's probably in the vicinity. I don't think we're going to be in the mood to spend millions of dollars, but a lot less than that might not be effective, but something less might be effective. So anyway, those are my thoughts on the actual motion. Chris, it looks like you want to comment, Councilmember Bernice.
Might be very brief, and my apologies, Councilmember Chiriki. We did get an email, 139, so look in your inboxes. Came to myself, 139 on Friday. So just look there in the afternoon, and you'll see it from Councilmember Chiricky. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Councilmember Neese and Councilmember Shaw?
Oh, thank you.
Councilmember Shaw?
I have a process question because I 100% support the concept, but am also struggling with some of the details. And I guess I would just like to ask the question of, is this enough? Should we be making our proposal as we want the county to match this? So I'm curious, if we vote, if this doesn't pass tonight, will there be an opportunity to re-vote on this?
If you bring another initiative, or I do, or I suppose Councilmember Chiricky could,
I don't want to cut it off at the knees. That's not my goal at all, but I'm struggling with the process of it.
Yeah, I cannot personally see any reason why that a no vote tonight would kill it, except, time is short. We would not want it to delay too much. Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. And Danny, thank you for bringing this forward because this is an important topic. Although I disagree, I won't support the motion because as it presented. I agree with the mayor concept-wise. I do agree. I think there needs to be something done. The numbers we see, and as John mentioned, these are county numbers. And I asked him, what's the difference between the city and county? We can't tell. So unless the county gets involved and really takes a leading role in this to really attack these numbers in the county, I think we should try to do what we can to get the messaging out, but I don't think the city needs to lead this. The county needs to lead this. The health community, it's a cost to them. Again, I think they're doing what they can. They're restricted. The county health officer is restricted what he can do. I would like to see him give us more recommendations saying, hey, this is what I think you should do, because he can't make the changes now, and it's possible. Again, Gina, we need some information from the city attorney on what we can and can't do. So, Mayor, I agree with that. So I would rather see this more as a committee, or whether it's a council committee formed to do this, or whether it's appointing the staff committee. It probably would be more beneficial to be a council committee, so we can appoint council members to it and start getting involved in trying what needs to be done so that we can actually move forward on something, and quickly, because you're right. By the time, if we wait too long, if those numbers, if they keep going the direction they're going, we're going to be back in the same numbers we were last year, but in the Delta variant instead of the Alpha. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Brown and Ronning?
Yeah, I too am absolutely okay with the concept. I think the 300,000 is somewhat arbitrary. I'd like to see it somewhat tied to, cooperation with the county. Maybe not 100% matching, but, could we match some funds that they're putting forward for this very effort? Again, I don't think the city is going to be responsible to do all of this. They've got ARPA funds, we've got ARPA funds. That's what they're designed for. I'm all for using them for this purpose, but I agree with Mayor Cole. Let's put a little meat on it, and I think it gives us a real good opportunity to work with the county commissioners, and we're bringing some skin to the game, in the realm of revenue, to help match them with that health area. So I'm all for the concept. The 300,000, again, arbitrary. So if we could put a little more meat on the bone, I would certainly support it.
Thank you, Councilmember Ronning.
Thank you. I agree. I absolutely support the concept. I see Billings as 68%, if not more, of the county. So I think that Billings needs to lead this, especially for the city of Billings. And I would love to tell you that I trust the county to move forward and really lead this. I just don't. And that's not anything against the Yellowstone County Commissioners. It's just that we have a responsibility to do it as well. And I don't want to just pass everything off onto the county when we are 68, if not more, % of the county. So I too would like to see us move forward on something, but I guess I would like real details on going forward and see if the county will come in with a match. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Puritan and Councilmember Trickey.
Well, I guess I'm going to be the naysayer on this one because I'm not particularly crazy about this. It's free to get the vaccination, and just because people haven't found time to do it, to me that's on them. And to incentivize people with money to do this, I'm sorry, I don't agree with that at all. I really don't. So, it'll be interesting to see what comes forward, but at this point, I would not vote for this. I would not support it.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Tricky.
To be really clear, all I really wanted to get out of tonight was a directive to staff to start moving on this at a very high priority.
And even if there's no formal, Chris, even if there's no formal vote in favor of this tonight, you've sort of gotten the tone, right? So maybe we could do what we can to kind of move this concept forward. Councilmember Ewald.
Thank you, Mayor. I kind of go along with what you said very early on about the county needs to jump on board on this. And then to tag on what Councilperson Ronning says, we're 68% of the general fund of the county. So if we split it 50-50 down the middle, we're paying 168%. That isn't right. That anytime we go 50-50 with the county, it's costing the citizens of Billings 168% or 160% just to make it right. And they need to step up a little bit more on some of this stuff because that's just the way it works. It's if Billings goes away, the county goes away.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Deese, and then let's move to a vote.
I want to clarify, I mean, the concept-wise, as far as what we're talking about, I am in disagreement of paying incentives, but there's lots of other things we can do, I think, to help get this out, get the community, whether it be a mobile type, home delivery, whatever it be. I think there's other ways that we can do this, but yeah, no, Councilman Purin, I'm not really in favor of incentives whatsoever.
Okay, thank you, Council. So we have a motion, we have a second. The motion was the specific $300,000 budget amendment and directing staff to work with county officials and the media to increase vaccination rates. So that's the motion. I think I stated that close enough, hopefully.
That's what I said, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so if in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, Councilmember Joy and reluctantly Councilmember Trinky decided to go along with it. If voting in opposition, please say nay.
Nay.
The nays have it, but we understand where the discussion went, and I'm sure this will not be the end of that general topic. And thank you for bringing it up, Councilmember Tricky. That then concludes our evening. Thank you very much, Council, members of the public, for your participation. We are adjourned.